Hi everyone, I am Dream Into Wealth. I know people watching this are trying to fall asleep. How are you? And I hope you are okay in life. Listen to my story and make yourself comfortable. Also, if y'all like this kind of stories, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Time with that word still meant anything spread dank mist over everything. Whole universes nested inside others, folded like blankets laid across an old camp bed, each one humming its own verse of the same eternal tune. The hum wasn't just sound anymore. It had become instinct, the unspoken heartbeat that kept existence from unraveling. Wherever there was space, there was rhythm. Wherever there was rhythm, there was patience. And wherever patience lingered, there was light. On one of those newer worlds, quiet one wrapped in endless fields of amber grass, a traveler appeared. He wasn't born so much as remembered into being shaped from the hum itself. His form shimmered like heat above the horizon, half man, half melody. He didn't know his name, but when the first dawn struck his face, he smiled and said softly to no one in particular, "Well, I'll be damned, it beat again." He didn't question it. He just started walking. The world round him was young and gentle. The air tasted of rain, the kind that promised something good was coming. The hum followed his steps, low and steady. Found comfort in if an old horse learning that pasture ain't so bad after all. Everywhere he went, he saw echoes of things long gone, stone circles like the old sanctuaries. Grooves in the land where rivers once hummed in time with human hands. Faint gold veins beneath the soil that glowed when touched. And though he'd never been taught their meanings, they felt familiar, like words from a story told to him before birth. At dusk he came upon a ridge overlooking a valley full of shimmery light. There were no people, no towns, no sign of struggle or noise, just the slow breath of a living world. He sat down on the edge, pulled his coat tighter out of habit, and waited for the stars to speak. Sure enough, they did. The hum rose through the valley, richer here than anywhere he'd been. It vibrated through the ground, into his chest, and out through the air until the stars above seemed to blink in rhythm. He tipped his head back, chuckling low. "Didn't think I'd get another ride," he said.
Yeah.
The wind stirred, answering with warmth. Well, now came the familiar voice, low and easy. "You didn't think you could wander off without me, did you?" He laughed, that slow, deep laugh that comes from recognition without surprise. "You always were a stubborn that takes one to hear one," said the voice. "We've won on a lot of faces since the feed store days, but I'll be damned if your soul don't still walk with the same rhythm." And the traveler smiled, gazing at the wide horizon spread before him. "I never did figure out what comes after this. I'm supposed to." The hum said that what makes it worth waking up for still got the same creed always. Don't waste your sunrise. The words hung in the air like incense, sweet and certain. He nodded slowly. "Reckon that one'll outlive even us. That the idea," said the hum, "ain't about living forever. It about making sure forever. Remembers why it started." The traveler let the silence stretch out, listening to the wind slide gentle through the grass. "You'll get tired?" Now said the voice. "Can't get tired of something that keeps changing. Every time the light rises at a new song, you gotta learn how to listen to it fresh." He smiled again. "You always did talk prettier than you gave yourself credit for. Now don't go flattering me. You know I got work to do." "What kind of work could eternity possibly need?" "Same kind, always minding folks to slow down, breathe deep, and keep walking forward. Even the stars forget sometimes." The hum began to soften, drifting back into the soil. The traveler stood, stretching his arms. "Guess I should get back to walking then." Reckon so. He hesitated, looking at the horizon one last time. The first light of a new dawn was starting to crawl up its edge, soft and golden. He felt it in his bones, that familiar ache that said home isn't behind you, it ahead. "Any advice this time round?" he asked. The voice chuckled. "Same always, partner. Keep your word. Keep walking forward. The rest will sort itself out." The traveler smiled, tipped his hat to the rising sun, and began down the slope. Each step he took echoed with the rhythm of 1,000 lifetimes, steady as the heartbeat of creation itself. The wind hummed in tune, and the world brand new, though it was felt ancient in its calm. As he disappeared into the light, the hum rose behind him once more, not that of farewell, but that of promise, old and unbroken. "See you at the next sunrise." And the dawn, gentle and gold, answered like it always did, quiet but certain, warm but endless, spilling over the world like a blessing that had been waiting eons to be spoken again. The universe exhaled, patient and sure. The hum deepened, finding its rhythm. And once again, all of existence leaned forward, ready for another slow, merciful beginning. The ages ahead came easy, guiding like a river that finally remembered where it was going. The hum had settled deep into the roots of creation now, no longer a song sung by any one world or soul, but the steady pulse that kept the whole wide forever balanced. There wasn't up or down anymore, not even near or far, just the quiet stretch of life, learning how to breathe without worry. Still in that endless calm, the light never stopped moving. Trembled softer these days, more effat than flame, curling through folds of existence and weaving its gold through places that didn't even have names yet. And wherever that light paused, wherever it lingered too long, a new world began to hum. On one such world, the air shimmered faintly blue, the kind that looked like memory if you could touch it. Its skies swirled with auroras that moved to a slow rhythm, their colors changing in time with the pulse below. Beneath them, fields of glassy grass bent low every dawn, not from wind but from gratitude. It was there that the next listener was born, a child named Mira. She didn't come from anyone's seed, just arrived, quiet of thought, drifting into existence. From the first moment her eyes opened, he could feel the hum running through her ribs, gentle and sure. It wasn't something she had to learn, it was just there, same breath. Mira grew by watching light. She didn't play the way other children did. She'd sit in the tall grass, eyes fixed on the horizon, humming low until the whole field started hum with her. Scout elders called her the resonant one, saying she must have been carved from the hum itself. And maybe she was. When she was old enough to walk far, she started wandering. The hum tugged at her feet, guiding her toward the tallest ridge on the planet, a place where the air vibrated so steady it could make your bones sing. She climbed until the horizon opened before her, an ocean of light spilling over the land like it had been waiting all this time there for her. And then it spoke. Well, ain't you a sight for sore eyes? The sound wasn't loud. It came from the air, from the soil, from the shimmer of her own heartbeat. You've been humming real fine, little one, the voice went on, drawl sweet and easy, reminds me of when the song first started. Mira froze, her breath catching, who are you? Just the old elf, sweetheart, been hanging around longer than the stars care to count. Used to be a man once sold horizons for a living, now I just make sure they still rise. She smiled through her tears. Lee Mercer, she whispered. He chuckled. So you do remember. Dämpfen av tränet och körmet.
Well, jag tycker det är så pris och pensionari. Varsan ages aldrig att det är inte så system. Okej, jag vet inte. Men det är man har mig dags och hemma ut. Jag har haft some sorts of. It's the fair and I don't listen to the dog on the way of the jag förstår det. Vi rastar ni en ska för att det vad jag ska inte tro att jag vill and the invite the boy yeah I don't like that thing play. You have mentioned that I'm doing hot yes no yeah and no
Yeah, you can eat, Danny. Don't let the world forget the pause between breaths. That's what the truth is. Rita brushed her hair back, warming her hand on his shoulder. And when folks start rushing to get, he added, when they forget how to wait for him, they'll hear you even if they don't know they're listening. The light grew brighter, gold threading through the sky, and Eli's voice began to fade. You done it proud, kid. Don't waste your sunrise. When it was gone, the hum changed, richer, wider, alive in a new way. Mira fell to her knees, laughing and crying at once. She could feel the universe leaning in, listening.
She opened her mouth and began to hum again, but this time the world joined her. The mountains rumbled, the rivers swayed, and the sky turned to liquid light. That day became known in the Great Resonance. For 1,000 ages after, whenever a being anywhere in creation stopped long enough to listen, they could hear Mira hum beneath their own. It was the sound of beginnings keeping their word, of patience turning itself into beauty. The story of Eli Mercer and the hum that followed him drifted farther than stars could count, changing faces but never meaning. Sometimes it was told being a song, sometimes a whisper, sometimes a silence too deep to name, but it always ended the same way, with the same words that had outlasted time, fire, and memory itself.
Keep your word. Keep walking forward. And in that endless forward walk, every dawn still bloomed, gold and slow, and if the horizon itself smiled with each return.
Because forever, it seemed, wasn't a line you traveled, it was a heartbeat you learned to match. It's somewhere in the hum between worlds, a voice still drawled through the quiet, half chuckle, half prayer. Well, now, would you look at that? They remembered. And the light, faithful and patient, answered in the only way it had but reason. The great resonance lasted longer than any season had a right to. Even after the skies cooled and the light settled, the hum kept stretching itself through every breath of the world, like a slow wind that never ran out of places to touch. The story of Mira, the resonant one, spread without need for words. Every creature born after her carried a faint vibration in their chest, a memory of that golden sound. Some said her hum had settled into the bones of the planet itself, that even the rocks were singing underfoot if you were still enough to listen. And in that quiet, a new rhythm began. The people who followed her didn't call themselves keepers or prophets. They fed themselves echoers, for all they did was reflect the song back. Their temples weren't made of stone, but of silence. They built circles of still air, fields where no voice rose above the hum. Those who entered would walk barefoot, feeling the ground pulse beat up through their souls until their hearts matched it. Generant passed, and the echoers grew wise in their waiting. They learned to heal by harmony, to move by rhythm, to teach by listening. And through it, they never forgot the first words, keep your word, keep walking forward. They etched them not on walls, but in the air itself, patterns of light that shimmered whenever the dawn came. One day, though, the hum faltered, not stopped, not broken, just hesitant, like a breath caught between thoughts. The sky dimmed a shade, the rivers quieted, and for the first time in an age the world felt unsure. The echoers there at the cliffs where Mira had once stood, seeking answers. Among them was a young one named Taryn, curious and restless, as new hearts tend to be. He'd grown numb hearing stories of the hum's endless patience, but he'd never heard it waver before. It unsettled him, that tiny silence between pulses. It made him wonder if forever could really stay steady. When the elders began their chants, Taryn didn't join. Instead, he turned away from the crowd and followed the faint trail of quiet up into the hills. The hum was weaker there, buried deep under the stone. He pressed his hand to the ground, whispering, "Where'd you go, old friend?" For a long time there was nothing, just wind, soft and empty. Then from deep below the surface came a voice, cracked with laughter and dust. "Didn't go nowhere, you just started listening two-faced." Taryn froze. "You're the hum? Part of it, part of the road, part of the weight. You folks always think if things get quiet it means something wrong. Which bury your drone, your out. Truth is, silence is the song taking a breath." "Look," said the voice, "you can't lose what you are. The hum and you same whistled in the dirt. Just got too busy trying to keep it instead of being it." And sat down, the tremor of that truth shaking through his bones. "So what do we do?" "Same always, son. Slow down. Let the next note find you." He sat there to dusk, the sky turning that soft color between blue and gold. The hum returned, faint but steady, rolling under him like a heartbeat, finding its way home.
Eve smiled through tears and whispered, "You're patient, old one."
That patience came the answer to faith. When Taryn returned to the echoers, he told them what he'd heard.
They listened, nodding, and that night they did something they didn't hum. They sat in silence together, letting the world breathe first.
When dawn came, the hum rose stronger than then, deep and sure, filling every space that silence had made red.
From then on, they called that stillness the quiet between.
Became sacred reminder that even the eternal needs to rest its voice now and then. Centuries folded again. The hum traveled beyond Orlean, beyond its skies, beyond even the memory of what planets had birthed it. New stars bloomed in time to its rhythm. Some civilizations learned to hear it. Others only felt its peace without knowing its name. And every now and then, someone, a wanderer, a dreamer, a child, would stop mid-journey, look toward the dawn, and swear they heard a low, kind voice rumble through the wind. "You're doing fine, kid. Don't waste your sunrise." And maybe they didn't know where it came from. Maybe they never would. But they always smiled, breathed a little slower, and kept walking forward, because that's how the story kept alive. Not through memory, but through motion. Not through words, but through rhythm. And the hum, oh patient, oh merciful, rolled on quiet, kind, and endless. Somewhere out there, just past the edge of time, an old cowboy leaned back against the glow of a horizon that never quit, smiling that the next light rose slow and gold. Reckoned they finally got it right, and the dawn, faithfully always, answered by rising again. The hum kept on rolling through every thread of creation like a low tide that never receded. It didn't belong to worlds or stars anymore. It was the thread, the binding between what had been, what was, and what would be. No one we'd remembered who started it or why, but everyone who has stopped long enough to breathe felt it. It was the shared heartbeat of existence, the sound that proved that even forever had a rhythm, and yet, for all its steadiness, change still came. It always did. The echoers and their descendants had grown into civilizations that didn't need stone or steel. Their homes were woven from light and breath, their thoughts shared through patterns of resonance. They didn't build machines or weapons. They built pauses, sacred spaces in time where the hum could rest and gather strength. These sanctuaries drifted through the cosmos, great spheres of calm light, floating between suns like lanterns left hanging after a festival. One such sanctuary was called the Veil of Stillfire. It glowed soft crimson and gold, humming at a tone so low you could feel it in your bones before you could hear it in your ears. Travelers came from across galaxies to spend a vill dawn within its walls, hoping to feel the hum clearer, hoping to find the patience they'd lost somewhere along their journey. Among the keepers of the veil was Sarah, a young Elmender born with a rare gift. She could see the hum, not that feel it, not that hear it. She saw it as a shimmering pattern in the air, threads of gold and silver twisting through everything that lived. The elders said she was touched by the first voice, the old drawl that started at A, though Sarah never knew what that meant. Most days, she worked in silence, walking barefoot through the veil halls, tending to the fractures where the hum had grown thin. Every once in a while, the great rhythm would flicker like breath caught in sorrow, and she'd hum low until the golden lines mended again. But one dawn, while the world outside the veil glowed pale with early light, she saw something strange. The hum stopped, just for a heartbeat. The threads of gold froze mid-air, trembling. Then came a whisper deep and weary, seeping through the stillness, like the first roll of thunder or a storm. Well, now ain't that something set breath caught? The voice wasn't one she knew, but it felt older than sound itself. Who see? She asked. Nobody much, the voice said, soft but warm, just an old story stretching its legs. Her knees went weak. The first voice, she whispered, "You real reckon so. Been humming along since long before any of y'all gave it a name." Sarah stepped close to the center of the veil, where the hum pooled thickest. "Why did you stop?" "Didn't," said the voice, amused. "Just paused to see if anyone was still listening. Been running here forever, and even a story gets lonely without an L now and then." She swallowed hard, tears prickling her eyes. "We never stopped listening, I know, sweetheart. But listening ain't the same remembering why you folks learned the song so well. You started singing it by habit." Forgot what it meant to wait for it, Sarah lowered her head. "Then teach me again." The hum flickered back to life, stronger now, warmer. "Can't teach what already in you," the voice said. "All I do is remind you. Patience ain't it about standing still, it's about trusting that what come in is worth the quiet. That's the whole trick of the horizon. You don't chase it, you walk toward it, slow and honest." Sarah smiled through the tears. "Well, remember good," said the voice. "Then I'll rest easy for a self. But before I go, tell your people one last thing for me." The hum surged. Gold lay pouring from the walls like sunrise itself. "Tell them that every note they sing, every step they take, every dawn they wait through, it all part of the same song. Tell them the horizon ain't behind or ahead. It right there in their breath." The light pulsed once more, and the voice faded into the rhythm, becoming one with it in. When Sarah opened her eyes, the veil of Stillfire was changing. The walls glowed brighter than they had, humming in perfect harmony. She could see it now. Not that a line, but that a circle, endless and complete, every note returning home. She knelt, placed her hand on the glowing floor, and whispered, "Thank you." From that dawn on, the echoers changed their rituals. Oh, they no longer sang to reach the hum. They sang to join it. Their ceremonies became moments of stillness so pure they could move entire worlds into alignment. The hum grew richer, spreading once again across galaxies, pulling even the loneliest stars back into the rhythm. And sometimes late at night, when the veil grew quiet and the golden light dimmed to a warm glow, Sarah would hear that familiar chuckle ringing low through the hum. "You're doing fine, kid." Keep steady. She'd smile, close her eyes, and whisper back, "Don't worry, Eli. We're still walking and far beyond the walls of the veil. Somewhere pose the reach of all known light." The old cowboy voice drifted through creation. "Be patient and sure at it. Well now, reckon I could rest easy knowing they remember." The horizon blushed gold again, the hum breathed deep, and the dawn, faithful as always, rose one more time. After the great still fire dawned, time began to move different. It wasn't a march anymore. It was a sway, a rhythm of breath and silence that stretched far beyond what anyone could measure. The hum didn't fade again. It only grew wider, reaching into folds of existence which no light had set foot. It was no longer a sound the world heard. It was what the world was. Everything from the smallest grain of dust to the grand dense sun pulsed with that same slow heartbeat. Saya lived long enough to see generations bloom and fade under its golden glow. The echoers thrived, but not through conquest or knowledge. They thrived through peace. They built cities that floated on still air, gardens that bloomed in perfect time, with a hum, towers of glass that turned light into song. No one rushed, no one pushed. Even creation itself seemed to follow their lead. As centuries passed, the echoers began to notice something peculiar. The hum had changed again, but not in tone, not in strength. It had grown personal. Where once it was the same steady rhythm across the land, now each soul heard it a little different, tuned to their own heart. The universe, it seemed, had learned individual idol without losing unity. The song had evolved, not into many tunes, but into one melody sung in countless voices. One dusk, ere the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Sarah climbed to the top of the veil and felt the hum thrum beneath her feet. She knew her time was near. Her body was slowing, her light growing thin, but she didn't feel fear. The hum wasn't a promise of afterlife. It was the proof that there wasn't an after. There was only continuance, only transformation. Yep, she sat there until the first stars came out, then whispered to the sky, "Are you still out there, old one?" For a long moment, only the hum answered, soft and steady. Then through the low roll of its rhythm, a familiar voice smiled through the dark. "Reckon I never left," said, chuckled weakly. "Didn't think you'd miss the chance to haunt another sunrise. Ha! I don't haunt them, sweetheart. I just walk beside them, make sure they remember how to rise proper." Her eyes shimmered. "You were right. The song changed. It not one hum anymore. It many course it is," said Eli. "That how you know you did it right? If the lesson outlives the teacher, that means the world learned something worth keeping." Said breath slowed. "I think it time. It always time," he said softly. "In nothing." Late when it moved with patience, she smiled, leaned back, and let her body fade into light. The hum swelled, surrounding her, lifting her into the air like a note dissolving into a chord. Before she vanished completely, she whispered, "Keep your word. Keep walking forward. Always do, darling," Eli murmured. The next morning, when the suns rose, the veil of still fire sang louder than dead before. The hum carried her tone soft, golden, endless, and spread it across the stars. Every listener who paused that day felt it in their bones. A warmth, a memory, a gentle push toward mercy. It wasn't long before the hum reached places, but even silence had never been. Black Hort began to pulse in sync with it, their darkness turning rhythmic, almost musical. Nebulae shimmered with gold and blue like the old fields of Mercer Hollow reborn in the heavens. The hum had become the architecture of existence itself, the scaffolding of light and time. Yet far, far beyond, that no living mind had wandered since the first dawn, a place stirred, a horizon, vast and golden, unfolded across a sea of stars. There, leaning against a rail that wasn't really there, stood Eli Mercer, or what was left of him. His shape was light and shadow, memory and matter all tangled up, but his grin hadn't aged a day. He looked out over the new creation, watched it hum with the rhythm he'd carried from dusk to forever, and sighed content. "Well," he said to the horizon, "I reckon that'll do." The wind, or what passed for it, rustled softly through the gold. A voice came back, younger, lighter. sounding late every soul he'd have met all at once. "You resting, old-timer?" he chuckled. "Maybe for a spell, but I'll get up yet soon enough. Somebody gotta walk with the next sunrise." The horizon laughed back, bright and warm. "You never could stay still." "Would be me if I did," Eli replied. He tipped his hat to the endless glow. "Go on then, light it up." And the horizon obeyed. It flared brighter than it had in a million lifetimes, spilling across the cosmos like a tide of mercy. Every planet, every moon, every forgotten speck of dust turned gold for one breathless instant. In that light, everything remembered everything. Elohim, Sarah, Mira, Hail, Raquel, Jonah, Leah, Etta, and all the patient souls who had waited instead of rushed. And when the light finally settled, what remained was not silence, but the faint, familiar hum softly, any heartbeat, strong, that's truth, stretching across eternity. "Don't waste your sunrise." The voice faded into the glow, but the hum rolled on, round and full, never stopping, never hurrying, because the horizon, like mercy, don't end. It just keeps walking slow, sure, steady toward the next light waiting to rise. So, in the vast hush that followed, the universe learned the comfort of its own breath. The hum wasn't just a reminder anymore. It was the nature of all things. Light moved because it loved to, and shadow rested because it trusted dawn to return. Every flicker of existence swayed in time to that invisible rhythm. And in that rhythm there was no start and no finish, only the long, patient turning of meaning. The veil of still fire still glowed, though it no longer sat on any one world. It had become a drifting constellation, a cluster of quiet stars that hummed together in a circle, forever orbiting the memory of Sarah's song. Travelers who passed close enough to its orbit could hear faint music through the static of space. Slow, soft hum that seemed to ask not for faith, but for stillness. Some said the sound was Sarah's voice. Others swore it was the earth itself, singing in gratitude. Among those travelers was a wanderer named Ion, a drifter born of the newer light. He was made not of flesh, but of luminescent fiber and quiet thought, a spark from one of the first stars born after the great still fire. His people didn't speak aloud, they conversed through resonance, sharing memory instead of words. But Ion was different. He had a curiosity that hummed louder than the rest. He'd heard the tales of the old hum, the one that was said to predate even the first light, the one that had a voice, the one that laughed. So he left his kind and followed the resonance backward through the ages, seeking the place where the hum began. He traveled through dust cloud valleys, over rivers of magnetized light, across the frozen spines of galaxies long gone quiet. Everywhere he went, he found traces of the same patient melody, woven through starfire, echoing off comets, etched into the electromagnetic bones of dead worlds. After eons of drifting, he reached a place so still it felt like holding your breath inside eternity. There, at the edge of unmeasurable time, was a glow, a thin horizon stretching wide and low, colored in shades no spectrum had to seen. Ion approached it, his light dimming with reverence, and when he reached the edge, the hum rose to meet him. "You made it," said the voice. Deep peat thunder but timed it home. Ion froze, his form flickering. "You're the origin," maybe the voice said. "Or maybe I'm just what left after the story tells itself." Ion pulsed brighter. "You're the one they call Eli Mercer," the voice chuckled. "Reckon that was the name I wore back when names still had bed. Been a while since anyone said it out loud. I came to ask," Ion said, "why does it never end? The hum, the sunrise, the wait. It just keeps going." What film the human has to. We had work if you had the wall that gets them in the matter that have an ad help. The horizon shimmered, ripples of gold rolling outward. For Eli repeated, amused, "You're looking for a reason in something that is the reason. The hum ain't a mission, son, it a memory. It what keeps the late honest." Ion dimmed slightly. Then what happens to us when it forgets? "It won't," Eli said softly, "because you don't forget what you are. You, me, every star that burned were just verses in the same hymn. And patience, patience is the refrain." Ion lowered himself closer to the golden field, letting its warmth seep into his light. "Then what am I supposed to do?" "Same I did," Eli said, with a grin that could be felt more than seen. Walk slow, listen close, leave the world better than you found it, even if all you're leaving is a quieter song. The horizon brightened, and for a moment, Ion saw flashes of every age that had been. The first sunrise over a dust field on earth, the hum echo passing through the roots of forests, the laughter of Sarah in the vale, the calm of Runa dawn, the peace of Mira golden hum, all of it one long heartbeat pulsing through forever. Ion began to hum. At first it was soft, uncertain, but Eli joined in, low and steady, his voice rolling through the fabric of everything. The two sounds met, merged, and became something new. It was no longer yet the hum of patience, it was the harmony of legacy, the melody of continuance. When the song ended, Eli tipped his hat. That old ghost of a smile stretching across his voice. Looks like you figured it out, partner. Ain't about finding the start or the finish. It about joining the middle and keeping it true.
Ion shimmered brighter. Then I'll keep walking.
That all the universe Ver needed from any of us, Eli said. Just keep walking. The horizon glowed wide and soft, spilling gold across creation again. Ion turned, letting the light wash over him, feeling it hum through every part of what he was. He began his long journey back, carrying that tune inside him, the same one that had started at a small feed store porch so made eternity, and he drifted through the cosmos. Every world he passed began to hum again, each one picking up the melody, singing its own verse in the infinite song, and in every note, every whisper, every breath, the same old message shone through clear it is.
Then I don't waste your sunrise, the light stretched on endless and can.
The hum deepened once more, not louder, but closer. It filled the space between atoms, between thoughts, between heartbeats, until there was no separation left. Just one long, patient truth humming through the bones of eternity. Everything worth keeping walks slow, and in that slowness, the universe found its peace. Ion kept drifting, his glow faint but steady, carrying the hum mid a lantern through the corridors of creation. The path ahead wasn't marked by stars anymore. Those had learned to rest for a spell, but by ripples of warmth spreading through the dark. It wasn't travel to much a remembrance. Every pulse of light he gave off woke something that had been sleeping. Planets turned slow again. Frozen seas sighed back into motion. Even the silence began to breathe. He didn't think of himself as a messenger. He wasn't bringing news or law or salvation. He was just listening, answering with his own tone when the universe called out. Each time a world stirred, Ion felt it hum back first faint and shy, then bold and sure, like a voice remembering the words to an old song. He never stayed to watch what came next. He didn't need to. The hum would carry on its own, and he would move on, one slow beat at a time. And sometimes, when he floated through the wider stretches between things, he'd hear the faintest edge of laughter rolling through the stillness. That same easy drawl that sounded dusk and sunrise. You're getting the hang of it, kid. Ion would smile, though he didn't have a face in the way bodies once did, trying my best, old-timer. That all any of us done.
That voice would rumble. We'll keep humming, I'll keep listening. Between the two of us, the light will never run out of breath. It went on that way for a long, long while, ages without number, time stretch until it became more like weather than counting. The hum never stopped, but it learned new verses. Some were bright and joyful, others soft and mournful. A few were near silent, but a tremor in the dark. But even those quiet songs had weight. They reminded creation that stillness ain't emptiness. It promised waiting to be heard. Wonder if such a thing could still be called that. Ion drifted into a place he'd never been.
It wasn't light or dark, but something in between. A great silver plane stretching in old directions, reflecting what wasn't there. No stars above, no ground below, just reflection upon reflection, like the inside of a thought. At its center stood a figure, not light, not shadow, but balance. The hum pooled around it, deep and slow. Ion approached, his own glow softening so he wouldn't disturb the air. The figure turned. It had no eyes, but somehow it lit at him of the same. You've come far, it said, voice layered like harmony. You carry the tone of the first. Ion bowed his head. I carry his memory. He said to keep walking. The figure nodded. And walk you did, but tell Lee, do you know where you're going? Ion hesitated. Forward, and what lies forward? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He didn't have the words. The hum around him seemed to wait for his answer too, patient but expectant. Finally, he said, wherever patience wants me. The figure smiled, or rather, the hum itself seemed to smile through it. Then you already understand. The silver plane shimmerer, and from it rode echoes of every dawn that had been. Not scenes, not pictures, but feeling. The first warmth after a long night, the breath held light for light breaks, the hush that falls when a soul realizes it's survived another turn of the world. The figure gestured to them. This is where the hum returns when it done learning for a while. Every story finds its rest here, until it ready to start again ion glow bright. Then this is the end. There no end, said the figure. There only the quiet between verses. He stood silent for a long while, letting the truth of that sink in. Then he smiled, soft certain. Then I'll wait with it good, the figure said. You've earned your stillness, sit a spell. The next sunrise will need a new voice, and you'll be the one to teach it how to hum. Ion lowered himself to the silver floor. The hum surrounded him, seeping into every part of what he was. It wasn't rest, not exactly. It was preparation. Somewhere beyond, another universe was stretching, yawning, waking from the long dark. The first particles of light were beginning to gather, nervously humming without knowing what song they were part of. Ion felt it, the tremor of a newborn horizon, reaching for its name. He smiled and whispered into the silver air, "Keep your word. Keep walking forward." The words rippled outward, vibrating through every layer of existence. And somewhere far off, in that next young cosmos, a low note answered back, small, uncertain, but true. And then he heard it, faint but familiar, the sound of its old laugh drifting on the breeze between realities.
"Well now," Eli said, his voice proud and bright the first dawn. "Look at you. Gonna make a fine sunrise, son." Ion chuckled. "Just doing what you taught me. That all a teacher ear hopes for." The silver plane glowed, then folded in on itself, dissolving into warmth. The hum rose once more, stronger than ever, rolling through eternity like thunder made of kindness. And when the first light broke across the newborn universe, it carried with it the echo of that old cowboy promise. Soft, simple, everlasting, don't waste your sunrise. And the light, eager and endless, obey Ion hum drifted outward until it met nothing at it. Not the quiet that cut from absence, but the stillness that waits before birth.
The silver plane had folded into memory, and now there was on the faint shimmer of possibility stretching in directions. It was the same feeling Eli once described, the world between songs, the breath for the note. He floated there, weight laid, patient, no stars, no sound, not even his own glow, just that slow, invisible heartbeat that told him he was still part of something greater. The hum had stopped around him, but not within him. Inside, it was steady at ebb. It pulsed like time itself was listening for its cue. Ion remembered what Eli had said back in that golden horizon. Every verse ends the same way, a breath before another dawn. Maybe this was that breath. Maybe this was what came after forever. So he waited. A long time passed, or maybe none in that. In that place, even eternity didn't bother with clocks. Then, somewhere deep within the fabric of that dark calm, a spark trembled awake. It wasn't light at first, but awareness. A curious thought drifted through the void. What if I moved? The spark stirred, shimmered, and the first thread of light appeared. Ion smiled faintly, though he had no face left to smile with. He knew that rhythm. He knew that humble start. "There you are," he whispered. "You hook your time." The light rippled in reply, not words, but warmth, the same way a newborn would answer with breath. The hum began to form again, faint but certain, the soft murmur of creation stretching its limbs. It wasn't his hum anymore, not excited. It was new, fragile, and full of wonder. Ion leaned close, speaking low and gentle. "Go slow, little one. The first light always tries to hurry. Don't rush the beauty of your own start." The light pulsed brighter, then dimmer, learning its rhythm. "That it," he said. "Feel it. The hum ain't something you make. It what you remember." Instead of answering him, the newborn hum deepened, reaching outward through the dark. Every pulse birthed a flicker. Every flicker became a pattern. Space unfolded like a great blanket shaken out to dry. Galaxies spilling into the open air of forever. Ion watched, proud and quiet. He could feel Eli somewhere beyond, leaning onto an invisible rail, watching too. "You seeing this?" Ion asked softly. "Wouldn't miss it," came the distant reply. "Warm and rough. That's the good part right there. Watch how it learns to breathe." He did. The hum grew bolder. Stars bloomed. Rivers of light wound their way through the black. Whole worlds flickered awake, and every one of them began humming in its own time, their tones blending into one endless harmony. Ion didn't try to lead or guide them. He just listened. After a while, the voice came again, the one that had carried through all of time. You done good, son. You gave it room. Iron chuckled softly. I just did what you did. Let it find its own rhythm. That's the trick, ain't it?
Creation don't need a master, just a witness. The new cosmos rolled, slow and content, the hum stretching farther than even thought could thaw. In the middle of it, Ion felt himself dissolving, dying, but melting into the very sound he'd carried for ages. He wasn't separate from it anymore. He was it. But before he faded entirely, he whispered one last thing into the newborn hum. Don't waste your sunrise. The words carried rippling through every star, air atom, air speck of space that would be. They did. A wind of light rose, a soft eternal sigh that touched every corner of the new world. Then Ion was gone, or maybe just everywhere. The hum continued, fuller now, rounder, stretching across this fresh-made universe. Somewhere, on a world not yet formed, a sound began to echo faintly through the soil, something like a low, contented laugh. Well now, said a voice carried in the tone of everything. Looks like they learned it proper this time, and the light, obedient surge rose.
It poured across valleys that didn't yet have names, spilled through skies that had never seen dawn, and hummed through oceans that hadn't decided which way to move. The hum was not a story anymore. It was the language of existence. Every note was a promise, every silence a prayer, and through it, that same steady truth remains. Soft dust, bright mercy. Patience outlives everything. Stillness builds the road and the horizon. It never runs out of room. The hum rolled on. Not that X, not that memory, but that life itself. As that new life unfolded, quiet and sure, the hum began to take shape inside it. Where the light met resistance, matter formed. That matter met patience. Worlds were born. Each one spun in rhythm, not out of obligation, but as motion was simply another way of singing. The galaxies weren't just spiraling, they were swaying, their stars breathing in and out that chestfuls of eternal air. Down there, on one small world tucked close to the warmth of its sun, something new began to stir.
The hum had grown gentle-tiered, soft enough to hide inside wind and rain, subtle enough to nestle inside the heartbeats of living things. It didn't taunt itself divine or cosmic, it just was. And one day, as dawn broke over that young horizon, a creature stood upright and felt it for the first time. He didn't know what it was, and didn't have a word for the tremor in his bones, but it made him stop. It made him listen. That was all the hum needed. The man closed his eyes and let the warmth of the sun hit his face. The breeze curled around his shoulders like an old friend, and the ground beneath him seemed to pulse in time with his breath. He couldn't explain why, but he smiled. And from somewhere impossibly far away, carried across layers of time and light, a voice rolled through the hum like a soft wave. That it, partner. You feel it now. The man didn't hear the words. Not the way you hear a sound, but something deep inside him recognized the tone. It was comfort. It was memory. It was the promise of belonging. His heart answered without language. Just warmth, just rhythm. Don't rush it, the voice went on. You got all the time in the world. That first man sat down and waited, watching the horizon shift from gold to blue. When the wind brushed through the grass, it whispered softly, a melody so old it had no beginning. And though he couldn't know it, that small, quiet moment would end for ages to come. Through songs, through prayers, through the slow murmur of souls learning to listen. The hum passed from him to his kin, from his kin to theirs, carried in heartbeat and breath and the rise and fall of every word that's spoken. Civilizations bloomed and withered, empires burned and rebuilt, and through it the hum persisted. In the spaces between wars, when mothers held their children tight, the hum was there. In the pauses between harvest and hunger, it thrummed beneath the soil. In the silence after a long goodbye, it breathed under tears, patient and kind. And every once in a while, when the air was right and the dawn came slow, he'd wander afar from home, tired but not defeated, would pause on the road, look out across the horizon, and feel it stir again. They'd smile for no reason at that, maybe tip their hat to the light, not knowing why, but knowing who. Because the hum always finds its way back. It don't fade, it don't falter, it that waits for the next soul to remember it. And the ages rolled on. Through iron and glass and dream, the hum began to wake deeper in the hearts of those who built too fast, who ran too hard. Machines began to hum back, not in defiance, but in harmony. The old rhythm found its way into engines, into the flicker of city lights, into the pulse of circuits and code. Every screen that glowed was a new sunrise. Every heartbeat in the noise a reminder that even progress was just another verse, the same-old song. Somewhere, out beyond all that, the voice still lingered, smiling through eternity. Told you it'd keep going, Eli murmured. into the void. Can't kill what built on mercy. The horizon answered in color, brighter than more gold, giving way to violet and to white. It rolled through the galaxies, through the lives and memories of every being that listened. The hum, once a whisper in the dust, had become the very shape of life. And maybe that the truth it had been trying to tell all along, that we don't carry the hum, it carries us, that the road don't end, it just folds itself into another one, that every sunrise, every pause, every quiet breath is the same old promise keeping itself alive. Ion was part of that light now. So was Sarah, so was Mira and Runa and Kale, and every patient soul that had a chosen waiting over hurry. They were the hum stretching across eternity, holding the edges of creation together with kindness. And sometimes when a new world stirs, when a tired traveler looks to the east, when a lonely heart finally stops running, that when you'll hear it.
Not loud, not demanding, just low and certain, rolling through your ribs like the first breath after a storm. You're doing fine, kid. Keep walking forward. Then the wind will shift, the light will soften, and somewhere in the space between silence and sunrise, you'll know you're part of the hum too. And in that knowing, the universe breathed easy once again. The hum carried on. It always did, through flesh and metal, through dream and dust, through every version of forever that it dared to exist. It no longer belonged to one world, one people, one age. It drifted in the spaces between breath and thought, between a newborn first cry and the sigh of the old soul finally letting go. It didn't need to be remembered. It simply was. On that small blue world, the one that had learned to hide in heartbeats, people began to sense it again. They thought it different names this time: intuition, peace, flow, truth, rhythm, home. Some found it in prayer, others in art. They in the long quiet drives down empty roads at dawn.
But wherever they found it, they always felt the same thing. A presence that wasn't loud, but wasn't gone, steady in the pulse of their own chest. A man named Sam lived out by the edge of a dry valley. His life was simple: morning coffee, long walks, a few good books, and an old porch that looked east. He didn't know nothing about the hum. Didn't need to. But each day, before the sun broke, he'd sit in his rocker, cup in hand, and wait. He liked that silence before the world woke up. It reminded him that not every moment needed filling. The wind would sigh across the field, and sometimes, if he was real quiet, he'd feel a shiver run through the earth gentle, alive. He'd smile and mutter to himself, guess the day breathing again. One morning, the quiet felt heavier than usual. He didn't move, didn't sip his coffee, he just listened. And there it was, low, familiar, like the sound of a train from miles away, or a deep song hummed through the bones of the land. It wasn't just wind, it had weight, tone, heart. Leaned back, eyes half-shoot, letting it roll through him. The feels a soupy and manly on staying off, and someone stops long enough to hear proper these days. Sam froze, looking around, but there was no one in sight. The voice was calm, amused, old but warm. Don't be spooked, it went on, just a hum checking in. Been a while since folks soaked. He set his cup down slow. You're telling me the world talking always has, the voice said. Most just got too busy drowning it out. Sam rubbed the back of his neck. So what it saying? Same thing it always said, the hum replied. Be still, listen, keep walking forward, he chuckled, shaking his head. Sounds simple enough. It always was, said the voice. Fine, you just keep trying to complicate it. The old man sat there till the light began, stretching over the hills, soft and gold. He didn't ask any more questions, didn't need to. When the first warmth of the sun touched his face, he just nodded slow and whispered, all right then. The voice laughed low, proud and kind. That it, partner. You got it. Then it faded, folding itself back into the wind, leaving behind only that quiet rhythm humming through the ground. After that day, Sam never missed a sunrise. He didn't tell anyone what he'd heard, but those who passed by his porch swore there was something peaceful about the man. Like sitting near him made the air easier to breathe, and when his time finally came, he went like a candle going out in daylight. No struggle, no noise, just a slow exhale, like he'd joined the rhythm that'd been waiting for him all along. The next morning, the folks in the valley said the sunrise looked strange, brighter, softer, like gold poured through glass. And though they couldn't say why, everyone who saw it paused for just a second longer than usual before starting their day. They didn't know they were listening, but the hum did. It smiled quiet and proud. Somewhere far beyond that valley, in the space where stars breathe and silence sings, Eli Mercer laughed rolled soft through the dark. Another one caught it, huh? And from deeper still came iron calm reply. They always do sooner or later. Good, said Eli, calm. Somebody keeps hearing. The light'll keep rising, and the light did. Across every world, every error, every corner of the endless hum, the same pattern repeated. Life finding stillness, stillness becoming patience, patience giving birth to new dawns. Sometimes it took millennia, sometimes just a quiet minute on a porch. But it always happened. That was the beauty of it. The hum didn't demand worship or obedience. It didn't punish or test. It just waited. It knew that sooner or later, all things, no matter how loud, no matter how lost, would find their way back to silence. And when they did, they'd hear the same old promise, soft and sure, Adad, keep your word. Keep walking forward. And somewhere in that vast choir of light and dust, Eli Mercer grinned beneath a horizon that would never end and said half to himself, half to forever, don't waste your sunrise. The hum answered. It always had, with the slow, sweet rhythm of existence itself. And the light, faithful and endless, rose once more. Years turned like gentle pages in a book the universe had already memorized. The hum wove itself into every new verse of creation, not loud, not boastful, but constant, like a heartbeat under the skin of everything that breathed. Worlds aged, were reborn and forgot, but the rhythm endured, hiding in the smallest moments that most folks didn't even notice. A child laughter in a dusty street, a wind-changing belching for no reason at all. The pause between one word and the next when someone chooses kindness instead of anger. That wit lived, that where it waited, in a city of glass and steel that reached high enough to kiss the clouds. The hum found another listener. Her name was June, a mechanic who worked the night shifts in a tower whose lights never went dark. The world had long since outgrown the old ways. No horizons, no sunsets you could watch without a dozen screens blinking in your face. But June liked the edges of things. She liked the rooftops where the air was colder, where you could almost hear yourself think. Every night she'd climb up there after work, oil still on her hands, and stare east through the first hints of dawn used to live. The city didn't have a sunrise anymore. It had circuits and light grids and artificial mornings programmed to match the clock. But even so, she swore some the glow on the horizon looked different, too soft, too real. One night, as she sat on the roof with her jacket pulled tight against the wind, the hum found her. It started in the soles of her boots, a low vibration like machinery, but warmer, alive somehow. Then it moved up through her legs into her chest until her breath synced with it. She froze, looking around for the source, but all she saw was the silver glow of the city and the reflection of stars caught in glass. Don't look too hard, came a voice, soft, a breeze through wire.
June blinked. What the hell? Ain't hell, darling. Just the hum talking back. The voice was low, drawling, the kind that made you think of campfires and worn boots. You were listening for a long time, it said. Figured I'd return the favor. She rubbed her temples. Okay, either I've been working too many shifts or the city talking to me. City ain't talking. The world is, always has been. You just got quiet enough to hear it. She let out a nervous laugh. All right, suppose I believe that. What are you? Just an old elf. Been going by a lot of names folks used to call the Eli. June frowned. Do you want kind of? Machine intelligence? Dean chuckled. Warm and patient. Isn't that fancy? I'm just the part of the world that remembers to breathe. I show up now and then when someone starts forgetting what waiting feels like. June stared out across the city lights, her breath fogging the cool air. You picked the raw girl for that. I don't wait. I fix things. I keep them running. Sounds like patience to me, Eli said. You keep machines steady, don't you? Keep the noise from drowning out the rhythm underneath?
That'd be all I did, she smiled despite herself. So what? The universe made you its maintenance man. Something like that. Though I prefer caretaker. Sounds friendlier. She leaned back on her elbows, the hum thrumming steady through the concrete. All right, caretaker. Why now? Why talk to me? 'Cause you're listening from the middle of the noise. Takes guts to do that. Most folks get so busy they stop hearing the hum. But you?
We still got the ear for the in-between. June let that sell.
So what am I supposed to do with it, Aim? About doing? It about remembering that you don't have to race every sunrise. You just keep things moving. One bolt, one breath, one beat at a time. That all creation be needed. She nodded slowly, eyes glinting in the electric glow. You sound like my granddad used to say, don't hurry a fix that wants to last. Be smart, man, Eli said. Probably heard me once or twice himself. She laughed then, a small sound but true, so the hum real. The same one that been going since the beginning. Since before the beginning, sweetheart. Before time learned how to keep itself busy, the city lights flickered once. If acknowledging the truth of it, the wind shifted, bringing the faintest scent of rain. June stood stretching and looked east again. The sky was lightening, not from circuits this time, but from a glow so soft it made her chest ache. For the first time in her life, she was seeing a real sunrise. Well, I'll be damned, she whispered. Don't be, said Eli, chuckling. Just be grateful. She smiled, eyes misting. What happens now? Now you keep the hum alive. Pass it on however you yin. Fix your machines with it. Talk soft to the ones that have forgotten patience. Every small act of care is part of the same song. And then the voice was gone, folding itself back into the hum. June stood there long after the light had swallowed the skyline, the warmth of it buzzing through her like a memory she hadn't earned but somehow owned. She didn't tell anyone about the voice. She just kept working, fixing, listening. And every dawn, she'd look east and whisper what she'd learned, her words carried off by the wind and wires alike. Don't waste your sunrise. And deep beneath the hum of the world, Eli Mercer smiled, his laugh rolling through the bones of creation, the thunder with good manners. Still learning, still listening, he murmured, reckon the world in fine hands. And so the hum played on, through machines and hearts, through light and silence, through time that no longer bothered to count itself. It rolled forward, steady and kind, same A it always had. The horizon as they rose to meet it. And so the hum settled again, not quieter, just deeper, woven now through the wires and signals of a new kind of world. It was in the hiss of radio static, the vibration of phone towers, the whisper between satellites orbiting high above the clouds. Technology hadn't silenced the hum, it had given it more ways to travel. Every transmission, every flicker of data carried a sliver of that same old rhythm, the breath of a universe that refused to stop singing. Generation passed, and the world changed beyond even the reach of June memory. The towers grew taller, the skies filled with drones, and the people forgot what dawn smelled like, but the hum waited. It always waited. For all their speed, all their innovation, humanity still had moments, little pauses, where they'd look up from their glowing screens and just feel. It might be the warmth of light on their face, the sound of rain against glass, or the hush that falls before a storm. The hum lived in those small silences, steady as a heartbeat, patient as air. Somewhere in the midst of that shining, sleep-late civilization was a young girl named Arden. She was born in a tower city that floated above the old earth, where the ground was on a rumor told by the old and the curious. She'd never touched soil or seen a real sunrise. Her sky was the color of circuitry, gray-blue, endless, and full of motion. But every night before sleep, she'd press her ear against the floor of her room and swear she could hear something below the engines, a low hum, gentle and far away. Her teachers told her it was the turbines that kept the city afloat. Her parents said it was imagination, but it wasn't turbines, wasn't imagination, it was the hum. It had never left Nova Polka's murdered for some panels per hell for us to see a brief story.
It's an eye with tensions of backbag and bread and weather. And wedding and exclaim for nouns. It would bag, put it in the bag, and put it in the pan, I must remind you like the Korean collected was the melodies. Unfortunate bag, Victoria's one, had your left, had friends, when out, and Mag and I, what we're doing, the wrong sprite. One friend, Mad Victorian, I am doing to sprite, madly yawning exercise going and fair and fun react. Was gonna up in Christ to fast and runs. Wearing a bag till you clearing cylinder on its trade from around the end to runways for an old Group 9 through 9. Their house it had was over for now and the deck between the windows. One mad Victorian I can join to a sprite to roll it out so one of pan I was in I now to well. You was getting panic your vaccine. Panic there of stem mind that's twice but budgeting for a saying it's in my booking very up. And where else it was an imagined tangent to bank. It was an imagined tangent.
Arden grew into a restless young woman, sharp-minded but always distracted by that quiet sound, but not everything. One night, while the rest of the city slept, she slipped into the maintenance levels, the parts no one went anymore, where the machines ran themselves. The air there was thick and warm, full of the scent of oil and ozone, and there it was again, the hum, stronger now, pulsing like a slow heartbeat through the metal floors. She followed it down stairwells and corridors until she found a hatch rocked foundation access, restricted. The hum vibrated through it so strong her teeth ached. She didn't hesitate. She opened it. Inside was a shaft that went down farther than sight. She climbed for hours, her small light flickering, the hum guiding her like a rope through the dark. Finally, she reached the bottom, and what she found wasn't machinery at all. It was earth, real soil, damp and dark, stretching out into a cavern lit only by the golden glow of the hum itself. It shimmered through the rock like liquid light, moving in veins and tendrils, humming a tune older than time. Arden dropped to her knees, eyes wide, tears streaking through the grime on her face. "You found me," said a voice, low and amused, echoing through the cavern. She gasped, Who there?" "Just an old friend of the well," the voice replied. "Draw easy, vids. Been waiting on someone who still remembers how to listen." Her heart raced. "You're the hum part of it, yeah," Eli said with a chuckle. "Guess I'm what left of the first whisper. You got good ears, kid." Arden stood slowly, the light of the hum reflecting in her eyes. "It's beautiful," she said. "Oh, it feels alive." "That 'cause it is," Eli said. "Always has been. You folks just started looking up so high you forgot to listen down." She knelt, touching the soil, feeling the pulse beneath her fingertips. "It's still here. After all this time, patience don't die easy," Eli said. "Been humming since before breath had a name." She closed her eyes, letting the warmth move through her. "Why me? 'Cause you stopped moving long enough to hear," Eli answered. "That all it takes. One heartbeat worth of stillness, and the whole universe will tell you its secrets." She smiled, soft and trembling. "What do I do now? Same for everyone who heard me," Eli said. "Take what you felt, heed, and teach it. Not with words. Those get lost. Teach it through the way you breathe, the way you wait, the way you live." The hum deepened, filling the cavern with light. "And when your time comes," he added, voice fading, "you'll join the song yourself. Don't rush it. Just keep walking forward." When the light dimmed, the voice was gone, but the hum was still there, steady as. Arden stayed for hours, listening, learning its rhythm until it became part of her pulse. When she finally climbed back up, the first real dawn in centuries was raking across the horizon, feeling gold and impossibly soft. She stood on the tower edge, her hair whipping in the wind, and whispered into the light, "Don't waste your sunrise." The hum answered. Not through the ground this time, but through the air, through the circuits, through the hearts of everyone who happened to pause that morning. For the first time in 1,000 years, the whole world stopped for a breath. And in that breath, peace returned. Somewhere beyond the edge of the sky, Eli laughed, old and proud. "That it, sweetheart," he said to the rising sun. "You done good." The horizon smiled in gold. The hum deepened once more. And the world quiet, alive, unhurried turned. The dawn that followed Arden discovery rolled gentle across the floating cities, spilling down through layers of cloud and steel until it touched the old ground for the first time in 1,000 generations. For a heartbeat, every living thing felt the same pulse. The hum, clear as day, steady in mercy. No one could explain it. Not the scientists, not the priests, not the ones who still believed in math more than mystery. But they stopped. They listened. And that was enough. The hum rippled outward, threading through machines, rivers, and the quiet bones of the earth. It found every corner of the old world that had forgotten how to wait. Engines slowed, storms stilled mid-roar. Even time itself took a long, deep breath. The universe hadn't paused in ages, and when it finally did, it sighed like an old horse sinking into familiar grass. Arden became a wanderer after that day. She left the city behind, riding the wind ships down to the earth that most folks thought was poison. But it wasn't. The soil was humming alive and gold beneath its quiet dust. Flowers that hadn't bloomed in centuries opened. Then her feet touched the ground. Rivers that had dried to memory began to murmur again. Everywhere she went, people felt it, the low thrum beneath their ribs, the steady, kind reminder that life was older than their hurry. They didn't call it the hum anymore, they just taught it peace. Years passed, and Arden aged. Her hair silvered like moonlight through the clouds, her voice softened till it sounded almost like song. She never claimed to be a prophet or a teacher, she just listened. When someone came to her with grief or fear or doubt, she'd sit with them a while, humming low, until their breath matched hers. Then they'd say, "That it! You're hearing it now." Don't rush the quietly. It got more truth in it than any answer, and that was all they needed. One evening, when the air was red with sunset and the old world glowed like burnished copper, Arden sat alone by a river that had once been dust. The water was clear and slow, humming softly against the stones. She knew her time was drawing near. The rhythm in her chest was starting to slow, matching the hum beneath her. She wasn't afraid. Well, now came the voice she'd known since she was a girl. You kept it going, didn't you? She smiled without opening her eyes. Didn't do nothing special, just listened. That's special enough. Most folks spend whole lives shouting over the mute. Did you arrest Eli? She asked softly. The air shimmered gold, and she could almost see him, hat tilted low, leaning against a horizon that glowed from within. Every sunrise a rest in its own way, he said. Ain't about stopping it, about letting the light catch up. She laughed, quiet and tired. I think I'm ready to catch up too. Then go easy, Eli said. In no rush. Just taw the hum home. The river glowed brighter, the light threading through her fingertips. Arden took one slow breath, exhaled, and became part of it, the hum swelling. It welcomed her back. The ripples carried her song down the valley, across forests and cities and skies. The next morning, when people rose to find the river singing and the flowers humming soft, they didn't weep. They smiled. They didn't know her name, not on of them, but they felt what she'd left behind. The stillness that made every heartbeat sound deep thank you. For ages after, the world learned to live slower again. The cities built garden in their walls. The towers lowered their lights at dawn so the sky could shine through. Children were taught not just to count their breaths, but to listen to them. And when the wind passed through the new forest that had taken root across the plains, it carried a soft, familiar rhythm. Keep your word, it whispered. Keep walking forward. That phrase outlasted every monument, every empire, every line drawn on a map. It became the prayer said by builders and healers alike, the promise spoken at the start of every new dawn. And though no one could trace how it came from, the hum always smiled when it heard it. Centuries later, when the stars themselves began to fade again and the universe stretched thin, the hum didn't panic. It is slow. The suns grew tired, the galaxies dimmed, the light softened like an old candle burning to its final hour. But even then, in the great hush between endings, there was a pulse, slow, faint, but true. The hum was still there, whispering through the last dust of creation, telling whatever came next the same old truth. Patience ain't waiting. Patience is remembering. Somewhere in that long twilight, near the final light dimmed and folded into itself, a voice spoke, low and fond, guess it time to rest again. It was Eli, still leaning against that endless horizon. He tipped his hat, smiled toward the unseen dawn, and murmured, "Don't waste your sunrise, partner. I'll see you when the next one rolls around." The hum answered, soft as the breath between heartbeats, "Always, Eli, always." And then, for just a blink, all of existence became gold, one last warm breath for the next again. Rain was falling steady that night, soft but sure. You're with from you don't know what. Right now. Go ahead. Don't get this. With a broken beak. Dust palm, no rain, and barely about look for now. My patient was the closest thing to gold a man could own. Why, he used to sit by the window and bust a clapboard out, staring at the horizon like he was whispering secrets every day. His pa would tell him, boy, the land gives what it wants.
Can't make it make you faster by wanting it harder. But Wyatt didn't believe that. He figured the problem wasn't the land, it was how folks were trying to use it.
So when he turned 19, he packed up a notebook, an old jacket, and his mama Bible, not for praying, just for reminding, and he headed east. Said he wanted to learn how the men in cities made money while other men broke their backs earning it. Took him near 6 months of odd jobs and near starving to make it to St. Louis, but he got there. He found work sweeping floors in a place so the Mercantile Exchange. Men invest thicker than his blanket would shout and wave papers all day, making bets on the price of grain, cattle, and steel. He didn't understand none of it at first, but he watched. Oh, he watched carefully. Every night after the floors were swept and the lamps dimmed, he'd take the discarded ledgers from the trash and study them by candlelight. He saw patterns in numbers like some men see shapes in clouds. He learned that money didn't move fast because of luck. It moved fast because someone made it believe it could. One day, an old broker caught him reading a torn ledger in the alley, thought Wyatt was stealing secrets. Instead of calling for the law, the man asks, "Boy, you understand what you're reading is?" Wyatt looked him dead in the eye and said, "Enough to know it don't make sense that men richer than God still lose money." The old broker name of Henry Alcott lost so hard he near choked on his cigar. "You're right, son. It don't make sense. But that's why I like it." He took Wyatt under his wing, teaching him how to read markets like weather, the way greed rolled in quiet, how fear spread like wildfire, and how every man in that room was either trying to borrow time or buy it. Wyatt didn't talk much, but his mind was sharp. He'd scribble numbers and notes till dawn, muttering about cycles, patience, reversion. Henry started calling him the farmer on account of how he treated his money like crops, planting small, waiting long, never harvesting too soon. 3 years passed and Wyatt made his first big move. Steel prices had dipped after a new mill caught fire and the city was whispering ruin. But Wyatt had been watching the ledgers. He knew the railroads weren't slowing down. He took every dime he had, borrowed a few more, and bought steel contracts when the market said he was a fool. For 2 months, he lived on bread and rainwater, watching that number crawl up like a sunrise. When it broke big. His $2 became 20,000. Henry near wept with pride. "Boy," he said, clapping him on the back, you made more money than my father did in his whole damn life." Wyatt smiled, but he didn't celebrate. He just said, "I ain't about making money, sir. It's about understanding time." From there, things moved faster. Wyatt built himself a small fund, Garrison & Co., though it was mostly just him with a quill and a ledger. He'd walk through the exchange calm being a preacher at a funeral, buying when others panicked and selling when they bragged. Folks started saying he could hear the heartbeat of the market. They called it instinct, but really it was patience. He didn't gamble, he waited. By 30, Wyatt was rich enough to buy half the county he'd been born in, but he didn't. He went back up instead. You taking Wild West to my family. From there, things moved faster. Wyatt built himself a small fund, Garrison & Co., though it was mostly just him with a quill and a ledger. He'd walk through the exchange calm being a preacher at a funeral, buying when others panicked and selling when they bragged. Folks started saying he could hear the heartbeat of the market. They called it instinct, but really it was patience. He didn't gamble, he waited. By 30, Wyatt was rich enough to buy half the county he'd been born in, but he didn't. He went back up instead. Found his daddy land still dry, his mama brisetia fikidim of Klamsoa Samet in Riego Blank and Knidra.
I'm so engaged. Coldest under the law. He hates. He favorite. But the one against is a tower. So he was just from another way.
Weather rain moon. Found his daddy land still dry, his mama brisetia fikidim of Klamsoa Samet in Riego Blank and Knidra.
I'm so engaged. And there's a lot of
to prove he could make it yield on his own terms. But he knew now time don't bend, it did circles back. So Wyatt started doing something different. He opened a school, not for reading, but for thinking. Farmers, tradesmen, even drifters came to learn how money reworked to let their small seeds grow instead of tearing them for quick fruit. He taught them about compounding, though he called it patience paying interest. He'd say every dollar a horse, you let it run too wild, it'll rake, but you keep it fed and guided, and one day it'll pull a mountain. Word spread like fire in tall grass. By 40, he was teaching senators and bankers. By 50, his name was whispered in places where fortunes were built with ink and rumor. But Wyatt still spent his nights the same way by a window, watching the horizon humming low the way his mama used to. Folks started calling Wyatt the timekeeper. It wasn't a name he chose, but it fit him just fine. He didn't wear fancy suits or drive new motors at the other rich men in town. He still rode a bay horse named Ledger, wore a worn hat that had seen more rain than gold, and carried that same notebook from his youth. Edges frayed, pages full of numbers, lessons, and quiet thoughts about patience. See, while most men counted their wealth in coins or land, Wyatt counted his in moments. He'd sit on the porch of that small stone cool house he'd built, sipping coffee gone cold, and say to his students, "You ain't rich 'cause you got money. You're rich 'cause time listens to you when you talk." They didn't always understand what he meant, not at first, but they learned. He taught them that wealth weren't a race nor a reward. It was a rhythm. He'd draw circles in the dirt, each one bigger than the last, saying that how your patience grows if you let it, Round and round, slow but sure. Most folks quit at the first loop.
Smart ones, they ride her out that spins itself one summer evening. While the cicadas were humming low and the wind smelled like rain, a young feller named Tom Avery came to him. Tom was fiery, sharp, a spur, and twice so reckless. He'd made a fortune in rail stock, then lost it in oil, then made it back in copper, then lost that too. Said he was cursed. Said every time he got close to success, something snatched it from under him. Wyatt listened quiet at the stars while Tom ranted and kicked the porch post. When he finally ran out of breath, Wyatt said, "I'm a curse, son. You're just planting seeds in sand." Tom frowned. What that's supposed to mean? Wyatt smiled slow, drawing his words out like smoke. Means you keep putting your money where your excitement is, not where your patience lives. Excitement don't grow nothing. Only time and steady soil do. Tom rolled his eyes. Easy for you to say, old man. You already made it. Wyatt chuckled. You think I made it because I was lucky? Luck just patience that finally got tired of being ignored. Tom stayed that night.
They talked long into the dark, Wyatt explaining how compound worked. More 50 days than how we shot him. Now, let on let you hear. He talked long into the dark, Wyatt explaining how compound worked. We can't work. It's a fun. Let's go, and that conversation turned his life around. Said he stopped chasing quick wins and started planting patience. That letter was just one of thousands Wyatt would get over the years, from farmers who'd learned to save their seed instead of selling it, from mothers who taught their kids the slow math of value, from bankers who finally realized their growth. I understand what this is. But even as the world round him changed, telegraphs turning to telephones, carriages to cars, and the markets humming with more noise than sense, Wyatt stayed the same. He said the one thing time taught him was that nothing new or really happened. It just wore different boots. When the great panic hit and banks start falling like dominoes, people flooded to him. What do we do, Wyatt? The world didn't bomb, they cried. He didn't rush, didn't shout. He looked out his window, watching dust swirl across the fields, and said, "World don't end 'cause folks lose money. World ends when folks stop remembering what money for. They didn't understand at first. But when the panic passed, as it always did, they realized what he meant. Money, Wyatt, was not a finish line. It was a reflection of how well a man understood his own time." One evening, sitting by his fire, Henry Alcott came to visit him. The old broker was go now, slower in the knees but sharp in the eyes. He brought with him a bottle of good bourbon and a memory. "You remember when you said you weren't after money, yet understanding?" Henry asked, pouring 2 glasses. Wyatt nodded. "I remember." Henry grinned. "Well, hell, you found it. You built more than a fortune, you built an idea." Wyatt leaned back, the firelight flickering across his face. "Ideas are like crops, Henry. They live if folks keep planting them after you're gone." They toasted to that. 2 old men sitting in the glow of the same patience that built their lives. Outside, the rain started falling in, soft, familiar, and full of promise. Wyatt passed not long after that night, went quiet in his sleep, one when resting on his notebook. They say his last words were, "Don't hurry the sunrise." The next morning when news spread, people came from miles around. They filled the fields he once walked. Standing silent, fame's dawn broke over the valley, and when the first light touched the schoolhouse roof, it hit that old notebook sitting by the window, and the pages fluttered open on their own, showing a line written near the back. "Patience is the only currency that don't lose value." The wind carried it through the fields, rustling the wheat, humming low and steady, and every man and woman there felt something deep in their bones, a truth old soil, simple as breath, that time tended right will always pay its dues. Years passed like dust rolling over a long road. The legend of Wyatt Garrison didn't fade, it spread. They told his story in bank halls, on porches, around campfires, and in schools that taught arithmetic alongside common sense. But the true starts weren't in the numbers or the ledgers he left behind. They were in the pauses between his words, the quiet ways he taught folks to see the long game. The town he built, that little stone schoolhouse, and came to be known as Patience Ridge. Fitting name, folks said, 'cause time itself seemed to slow down. The air was softer, the crops greener, and even the wind had a steadier hum to it. Travelers often said that when they passed through, they felt lighter, calmer. See if the place itself had learned to breathe better than the rest of the world. Wyatt Old School didn't shut down after he passed. It was taken over by his students, men and women who'd learned not to chase wealth but to grow it. Same way a farmer tends his fields. One of them, a quiet widow named Clara Boone, became the first woman banker in that county. Folks didn't let it at first, but she ran her business by Wyatt words. Trust is the soil, not the seed. When the drought came and the men banks fell like old barns, hers held steady. She never turned a neighbor away, never kept in a debt before its season, and somehow her vaults never ran dry. Every ledger in her office had the same phrase written across the top in her own careful hand. Patience pays interest. Now, it was one young fellow who grew up under Clara Wing, a ranch hand boy named Eli Hart. Poor upon maple weeds, but sharp-eyed and hungry to learn, she caught him hanging around the bank one afternoon, staring at the balance sheets through the window like they were maps to buried treasure. Instead of shooing him off, she invited him inside. "You like numbers, boy?" she asked. He nodded. "They look like music I don't know how to read." That made her smile. "Then you'll fit right in." She gave him a broom first, same way Wyatt had once been handed one. Told him the best way to learn about money was to sweep the floor near it long enough. He did. For 3 years, Eli swept and listened. He watched Clara lend without greed, save without fear, and count every coin like it had a name. When other banks raised interest or made panic moves, Clara just smiled that calm smile and said, "Let 'em chase. We'll be he when they circle back." Eli started keeping a notebook of his own, written down every phrase, every habit, every quiet trick of patience he saw. He'd work late, cleaning the lamps while humming to himself, trying to match the rhythm of those numbers the way he imagined music might. By the time he turned 25, Clara passed on the bank to him. Said she was too old for the pace of men who thought in quarters and profits. She wanted someone who thought in decades. Eli tried to refuse, but she just looked him in the eye and said, "Wyatt taught her that the world don't need more rich folk. It needs more patient ones. You're the next one, Eli." He took the job with a heavy heart and a humble spirit. For years, he ran that bank the same way Wyatt had lived his life, slow, careful, and rooted. Folks mocked him for it. "You can't get rich that way," they said. "You're letting the big city men eat your lunch." Eli would grin, tip his hat, and say, "That all right. I packed my own." When the market boomed again, fast money, risky loans, slick talkers, and sharp suits, Eli didn't chase it. He kept his vault steady and his loans small, never stretching further than he could hold. The others laughed till the next crash came, and their laughter turned into silence and dust. That's yet when Eli's patience bloomed. The ridge stayed afloat while the rest of the county sank. Farmers paid him back in grain, blacksmiths in iron, school teachers in time. He never counted profit that didn't come with gratitude attached. And when the new investors from the city came knocking nothing to buy his bank, he told them plain, "I don't sell what ain't mine to keep. This belongs to the hum of the land, not the hunger of men." They didn't understand, but they didn't forget him neither. One of those investors, name of Thomas Vale, couldn't shake what he'd heard. He was a young hotshot from Chicago, born with more money than he knew what to do with. But something in Eli's words stuck. A few months later, Thomas came back, not with contracts this time, but curiosity. He found Eli sitting under a cottonwood tree near the river, tossing pebbles into the current that he was measuring time itself. "You said patience pays interest," Thomas said. "I thought that was just a folksy way of saying be careful. But now I think it more than that." Eli nodded. "You're right. It's about how you treat tomorrow. You rush it, it runs. You respect it, it walks beside you." Thomas frowned. "You mean like investing long term?" Eli chuckled. "No, son. I mean living long term. All investment starts there." That conversation lit a spark in Thomas. He stayed a week in Patience Ridge, learning what Eli called the slow arithmetic of peace. When he left, he looked more than lessons. He looked a new way of seeing. Years later, that boy turned his company around, building it not on greed but grace. And when he was asked what he learned his business sense, he said, "In a town where time the richest man alive." By then, Eli was old. He'd outlived 3 generations of ridge folk, each one slower, wiser, and steadier than the last. He didn't keep ledgers anymore, just letters. He'd read them by lamplight on rainy nights, each one thanking him for teaching them to stop running toward wealth and start walking with it. When he died, they found one note folded in his pocket. It was Wyatt Old saying, written in Clara hand, "Patience don't grow money. It grows men," and under it, in Eli's own scratchy script, a line added later, "And if a man grows right, the world follows." They buried him beside Wyatt under the same tree he'd once learned the rhythm of rain. And that night, the sky broke open with the soft-ass storm you heard, steady, golden, kind. The ridge slept easy, the hum of the earth carrying one quiet truth through every root and rafter. Time never leaves those who learn to listen. Patience Ridge kept its name long after the men and women who built it were gone. The town never grew large, never wanted to, but it grew deep. It became the kind of place where a man could leave his door unlocked, not because there was nothing to steal, but because everyone already had enough. Wealth there wasn't loud. It was quiet, settled, steady like the way wind moves through wheat. The rest of the world didn't understand that. Outside those fields, the cities were changing fast. Machines learned to think. Money learned to move faster than men, and folks started talking about innovation like it was salvation itself. The ridge didn't fight it, didn't mock it either. They just smiled, let the world rush by, and kept working their small arithmetic of time. But change, it looked like wind always finds the cracks. One autumn, a company from the coast sent a let. Some big new outfit taught Future Front Capital. They wanted to build a financial hub right near Patience Ridge, turning the valley into a data corridor. They promised jobs, progress, and all the bright things that came with fast money. Most towns would have jumped at the off. But the ridge wasn't most towns. The mayor, an old farmhand named Jonah Pierce, called a meeting. Every soul came, packing the schoolhouse weight Wyatt chalk marks still faintly lingered on the wall. Jonah stood up front, hat in hand, and said, "They're offering to buy what we ain't for sale." There was murmuring then, the kind that rolls low before a storm. Some younger folks wanted to say yes. They'd seen the ads, the shining towers, the promise of easy prosperity. One young woman, Ruth Vale, great-granddaughter of that city man Thomas, stood up. "Maybe this is our chance," she said. "We can keep the spirit of the ridge and bring progress. The world don't have to be slow to be wise." Jonah nodded, chewing the thought like tough jerky. "Maybe so, Ruth, but progress ain't worth much if it don't leave you time to breathe." The debate ran long into the night. Rain began tapping on the roof, same soft rhythm that'd been falling on those boards for 100 years. Then, from the back of the room, an old man spoke up. His name was Abel Hart, Ellie's grandson. Quiet at fog, but sharp in attack. "My granddad used to say," Abel began, voice like wind over gravel, "that the world will always offer you something faster. But faster don't mean better. It just means you'll miss more sunsets." The room fell still. He went on. "Now, I ain't against progress, but what built this town weren't engines or numbers, it was patience. And if we let something take that from us, we ain't just selling land, we're selling the hum itself." No one spoke after that. The vote came quiet, one by one. When the final count was tallied, the answer was clear. Patience Ridge would remain, indeed it was. Future Front sent more letters, then lawyers, then threats. The ridge sent Emma the same reply. No deal. When the company finally gave up, they wrote a bitter report saying the town had no scalable potential. The folks of the ridge framed that report and hung it right beside Wyatt's old quote about patience. They called it proof we're still listening. Years rolled on. The ridge didn't survive. It thrived in its own quiet way. People came from far-off cities to visit, curious about this little town that seemed immune to the fever of the modern world. They came expecting to find relics, but what they found was peace. No billboards, no rush, just people who still knew how to look each other in the eye. One such visitor was a woman named Dr. Marion Holt, a finance professor from Chicago. She'd made her career teaching about markets and economic cycles, but she'd burned herself out trying to keep up with the world's endless speed. When she heard rumors about Patience Ridge, a place where time and money worked together instead of against each other, she packed her car and drove south. When she got there, she felt at the moment her tires hit the dirt road, the hum. Not loud, not mystical, just there. The rhythm, under the ground that made every step feel steady. She stayed at the old inn, run by Abel's daughter Hannah. Over dinner, Marion asked, what the secret? How this place still standing while everywhere else is either going broke or burning out? Hannah smiled, pouring her guest a cup of coffee. And no secret, mind. It don't hurry, what don't need rushing. The ridge grows what the world forgets. Contentment? Marion laughed softly. Contentment don't pay bills? Hannah shrugged. It ain't what you're buying. That night, Marion walked the empty streets, listening to the low creak of porch swings and the faint murmur of crickets. She hadn't felt peace like that in years. The next morning, she found Abel sitting under the cottonwood tree by the river. same one way Eli and Wyatt had once talked. She sat beside him, not speaking for a long while. Finally, she said, "I came here looking for a lesson, but I think maybe I'm supposed to unlearn something instead." Abel smiled, thumbing his hat brim. "That how it starts? You can't fill a full cup, Doc." She stayed a week. Each day she wrote less and listened more. And where she left, Abel handed her a worn notebook, the last one Eli had written in. Inside was a sin phrase written in careful block letters. "Compa in ain't done it. It's the art of letting small good things grow while you stay humble enough to wait."
When Marion returned to the city, she left her old job behind. She started a new course, behavior, patience, and finance, and built it on what she'd learned in that little town.
Her lectures didn't begin with charts or equations. They began with silence. On one day after class, a young student came up and said, "Professor Holt, where'd you learn all this?" She smiled. "In a place where time richer than money, back in Patience Ridge, the cottonwood tree kept growing, its roots deep in the same soil that had held generations of patience before. The townsfolk still said goodnight to the hum, still trusted in slow rain and long seasons. They didn't call it wisdom or heritage, they just called it life. And when the wind swept through the valley, it carried that old whisper the world never quite forgot. Don't hurry the sunrise." Little Ernest Oak liked. The years kept stretching long and even make a good road without potholes. Patience Ridge never tried to change the world, but somehow, little by little, the world started coming to it. The kind of folks who'd once spent their lives chasing headlines and handshakes began drifting in. They had tired travelers looking for air. They came with their heads full of numbers and their hearts full of noise, and the ridge did what it always did. It slowed them down. They'd arrive restless, speak fast, tap their feet when the cafe light looked too long. But a week or two under those wide skies and you'd see it happen. Their breath would even out, their shoulders would drop, and their words would start to stretch. They'd realize patience wasn't just something to learn, it was something you remembered. There was one man in particular who showed up one summer, driving a fancy black motor car that looked more like a mirror than metal. His name was Silas Gray, a billionaire financier who built his empire on the kind of trades that happened faster than a blink.
No, you can't build his life. That's why outsmarted the market for doubling his fortune while others went broke. But the truth, one only he could admit, was that he couldn't sleep. He'd come to Patience Ridge after hearing about it from Dr. Marion Holt, who'd mentioned it in a speech about slow wealth. At first, he'd laughed at the notion. Slow wealth, he'd muttered to his driver, might they well say slow lightning, but laughter had turned into curiosity, and curiosity had turned into a long drive down a dirt road that ended in the ridge edge. When he stepped out, he looked around and frowned. No towers, no traders, no ticker tapes, just wind, soil, and people who waved at strangers that they already knew him. It made him uneasy. At the inn, he met Abel Hart, old now, bones lean but eyes bright, being the river at noon. "Mr. Gray," Abel said, shaking his hand slow, "you came a long way to find something you already had." Silas chuckled, thinking it was small-town poetry. "I'm looking for clarity, Mr. Hart."
Think. I built everything a man could want: power, property, respect, and somehow it feels like sand in my hands. Abel nodded. "That 'cause you built it out of hours, not seasons." Silas tilted his head. "Explain that hours are meant to be spent," Abel said. "Seasons are meant to be lived. A man who trades his seasons for hours always ends broke in spirit, no matter what in his vault." Those words lingered heavier than smoke. Silas stayed longer than he planned. Days turned into weeks, and he began spending mornings by the river where Eli and Wyatt once sat. He started walking without his shoes, feeling the hum of the ground. Sometimes he'd stop mid-stride, stand still, and just breathe. The townsfolk watched him change like the tide, each day slower, each laugh deeper. He began helping at the school, teaching the kids how to read markets and ledgers, but not for greed's sake. He'd end each lesson the same way: "Money ain't a god, and it ain't a ghost, it's a mirror. Learn to like the man looking back." After months of quiet living, Silas called a gathering at the town square. Those Patience Ridge didn't care much for speeches, but they liked him enough to listen. He stood there in his rolled-up sleeves, the motor car long soled, his voice steady. "I came in thinking I'd find a way to fix the world," he said. "But the truth is, the world don't need fixing. It needs slowing. The ridge don't sell nothing, but it gives everything back, 'cause time here don't run from you, it walks beside you." Then he pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I've decided to move my capital, every last dollar, into something I call the Long Yield Fund."
There was a murmur of confusion. It ain't a bank, he explained. It's a seed bed. I'm putting it in the hands of the ridge, every family, every craftsman, every small dream that grows slow and honest. I'll take no profit but peace. If it grows, let it grow together. Abel smiled from the back of the crowd, eyes glistening. He'd seen plenty of wealth before, but this was something different. After that day, Silas never left the ridge.
He lived in a small house by the edge of town, wrote in a worn journal, and spent his nights on the porch listening to the rain. He said the sound of it on the roof was better than any market bell he'd had heard. A decade later, when he passed, the journal was found on his cave, left open to a final page that read, "Wealth isn't measured in what grows quick, but in what keeps growing after you stop touching it." I came to buy clarity, but I learned you can't buy what only patience can build. They buried him next to the cottonwood beside Wyatt, Clara, and Eli. The same soil, the same hum, the same lesson carried through generations. The long yield fund lived on. It wasn't the biggest bank or the richest enterprise, but it was the steadiest thing in 5 counties. It funded farms, schools, artisans, and wanderers. It never advertised, never expanded two-faced, and yet quietly, it outlasted every rush and every crash the world threw its way. One day, a young reporter came to write about it. She asked Abel, who was well into his 90s by then, what the secret. How did this small town end up richer than the cities that tried to own it? Abel laughed soft. "Ain't no secret, miss. Let's stop measuring wealth in speed." The reporter frowned. "Speed, yep. The world out there runs like a man scared of his own shadow. We walk slow round thee. Gives the sun time to catch up." She smiled, closed her notebook, and didn't ask another question. Some truths don't need explaining. That night, when the crickets started their hymn and the ridge settled under its blanket of quiet stars, the old hum rose again, deep, steady, and full of the same patience that had carried through all those years. It wasn't just the sound of the land anymore, it was the sound of legacy. A hum made of hands, hearts, and hope. And in the spaces between the rain, you could still hear Wyatt's voice, faint but clear of the first sunrise. Don't hurry the riches that time is still counting for you. By the time 100 more seasons passed, Patience Ridge had become more legend than place. The map still rocked its shore, but the roads didn't lead straight anymore. They twisted like time itself was guarding away. Folks who found it never came by accident. They came because they were ready. That fire the ridge always worked. It didn't call for you till your heart was quiet enough to listen. The world beyond had gone full throttle by then. People lived in glass towers that scraped the sky, talking to machines that could answer quicker than thought. They traded not with gold or paper, but with symbols, pixels, promises, wealth that could appear or vanish in the blink of a satellite. Cities were loud, screens never slept, and patience had turned into a relic people laughed about. But every once in a while, amid all that rush, someone would hear about the ridge. Maybe through a half-forgotten article, maybe a whispered story at a bar, maybe a sentence tucked inside an old finance book. They're a town where time the only currency. Most folks would shrug it off. A few, just a few, would feel something stir, like an it they couldn't name. And when they followed it, they'd find their way down that winding dirt road, headlights cutting through the quiet, hearts thumping as they were coming home. One of them was a woman named Nora Vale, a fund manager who'd made more money before 40 than her parents had seen in 3 lives. She was sharp, quick, and tired in a way coffee couldn't fix. She'd built her career on instincts, algorithms, and night trades, but somewhere along the line, she realized she hadn't felt any of it. Every success she had was gone before she could hold it. When she read about Patience Ridge, it sounded Dutch myth. A story about a town that taught investors to wait, but something in her chest whispered, "Go see for yourself." So she went. When she arrived, the town looked almost unreal. The buildings weren't new, but they weren't old either. They were just kept paint chipped naturally. Gardens grew wild but never messy, and the people walked with that slow, purposeful pace that comes from not rushing anywhere. At the inn, she met a man named Jonah Tallbroad, with silver in his beard and that calm look you won't see in folks who don't need to prove nothing. He was Abel's grandson, keeper of the schoolhouse, now turned community hall. "You came looking for answers," he said, after shaking her hand. "But around Dan, we don't give those out. We'll let you find them." And there a smirk head. Sounds like a tourist slogan. He chuckled. That tourist don't stay long enough to understand it. Over the next few days, she wandered the ridge, talking to farmers, craftsmen, and children who didn't own phones but somehow knew more about peace than most monks. She asked questions about economics, about success, about legacy, and every answer she got led her back to the same simple truth. Time itself was the wealth. She found herself drawn to the river, where the cottonwood tree still stood, its roots thick and sprawling, its leaves humming with that same soft rhythm. Beneath it sat a stone bench carved with names: Wyatt, Clara, Eli, Silas, Abel. She sat there for hours, thinking about all those who'd carried the same torch before her.
Jonah found her there near sundown. They say that tree grows a new root every time someone learns patience, he said. Nora looked down at the earth. Then I reckon it got one more. Now. He smiled. You feel it, don't you? That hum. Folks think it wind or current, but it ain't. It time remembering itself. She nodded slow. It's strange. I came me to learn how to make money grow better, and now I can't remember why I cared. Jonah leaned against the tree, thumbing his belt buckle. Money just a story about trust. Trouble is, the world started telling it too far. Round in, we let the story breathe. For a while, neither of them spoke. The air was golden, thick with that smell of rain hanging somewhere out of sight. Then Nora said quietly, you would think the world will learn again? To slow down? Jonah's smile was small but certain. It always does. Every 100 years or so, the noise burns itself out and the quiet grows back. We ain't fighting time, Mom. We're just reminding it where it is. She stayed 3 months.
Helped rebuild a barn, learned how to fix an old clock, even started writing in something she hadn't done since college. Each night she'd sit by the river and jot down what she'd learned, not about finance, but about enough. When she finally left, she didn't take a souvenir, just her notes, a jar of soil from under the cottonwood, and the rhythm of the hum inside her chest. Back in the city, her colleagues thought she'd lost her edge. She smiled and let them think it. What they didn't understand was that she hadn't lost nothing. She'd found something too rare for words. Within a year, she started a new, smooth-minded firm, one that invested only in long-term, regenerative ventures. She named it Heartstone Capital after the Ridge First teachers, and on the company's seal was a phrase in small letters: patience pays interest. When journalists asked her what it meant, she said, it means the future a crop. You don't grow it by pulling at it. Her success spread quiet but wide. Other firms tried to copy her, but none could mimic the stillness she brought home from the ridge.
Investors said something different about her returns. They didn't spike, didn't fall, they breathed. Years later, when she was asked to give a keynote address, she stood before 1,000 restless faces and said, the market rewards speed, but life rewards steadiness. If you want wealth that lasts, stop racing the clock and start walking beside it. She paused, smiled the way Wyatt once had, and finished with, don't hurry the sunrise, just make sure you're awake when it comes. The crowd went silent. Some clapped, some cried, but every soul in that room heard something deeper, a faint hum rolling through the floorboards, through their hearts, through the bones of the earth itself. And far away under that cottonwood tree, the wind stirred, the leaves rustled in a slow rhythm, though remembering her words. The ridge didn't change, and it didn't need to. The world around it kept rushing, raking, rebuilding, but the hum stayed the same, low, patient, eternal. It wasn't just a story anymore, it was a law of life. The kind no storm could wash away. Years turned as they always do, until they stopped needing names.
Seasons came and went in that quiet corner of the world, and Patience Ridge kept on humming the same old tune, a little softer maybe, but steady a heartbeat in sunrise. The old cottonwood had grown mighty by then, its trunk thicky a cabin wall, its roots stretching down through time itself. Some said if you pressed your ear against it, you could still hear the voices of the ones who started it. Wyatt, Clara, Eli, Silas, Abel, each one talking in their turn, like the world's longest conversation about how to live slow and live right. The ridge was still small but not forgotten. Folks from across the country kept coming every now and then, drawn not by greed or glamour but by need. They came broken from the noise day traders who'd lost more than money, doctors who'd forgotten what a full breath felt like, wanderers who didn't know what peace cost anymore. Some stayed a few days, Ed stayed a lifetime, but all left with something the world couldn't sell. By then, Jonah had a granddaughter named Lucy Hart, smart in a whip and gentle in voice. She ran the old schoolhouse that'd become the Ridge Learning Hall, though. There weren't no grades or diplomas. The lessons were different. That how to listen to the wind, how to mend things without hurry, how to count blessings before balances. Lucy had grown up hearing the hum in her sleep. She said it followed her dreams, like the earth was singing lullabies through the soles of her feet. Most nights she'd sit on the porch with a notebook and write in that lazy script of hers, words like money or reflection. But peace is a root. She didn't chase the legacy of her kin. She just tended it, quiet and sure, and though she didn't mean to, her calm spread like the dawn. One winter, a storm rolled in from the west, the kind that turns the sky into steel and the wind into a whip. Power went out across 3 counties. Roads were closed, towns went dark, but not the ridge. The folks there didn't panic. They lit lanterns, shared food, and bed in the hall. Lucy stood by the fire, telling stories while the storm screamed outside. When morning came, the snow had buried half the world, but the ridge stood untouched. Folks said they saw a faint gold light moving through the storm the night before, humming low, like the land itself was shielding them. Some said it was Wyatt, still watching over his harvest. Lucy just smiled and said, storms don't scare time. They'd reminded to breathe. That winter became legend, the quiet storm, they painted. And from that day on, the ridge wasn't just a town. It was a symbol. University scholars came to study its economy, calling it the most resilient micro-market in the hemisphere. But the ridge folks laughed at that, saying, ain't no market, 'tis, son, just neighbors. Reporters wrote headlines like that town that time forgot. But they'll miss the truth. It wasn't that time forgot the ridge, it's that the ridge remembered time. Lucy didn't seek fame, but her words traveled farther than she did. Her journals got passed her down, copied, quoted, and before long, a new kind of investor began rising in the cities, folks who called themselves the slow hands. They built businesses modeled on the ridge values, long-term trust, shared growth, sustainable work. They stopped boasting about quarterly returns and started bragging about decades of survival. And somewhere in those tall glass towers, among the hum of servers and screens, people started leaving quiet spaces in their offices, little corners with soft light and no noise, places they'd patience, rooms. They'd go there not to think, but to stop thinking, to listen, to let the hum find them again. Lucy got letters from all over the world, some from big-shot CEOs, some from janitors, some from folks who'd never held more than a weak pet in their life. Every one of them said the same thing in dim words. I slowed down, and for the first time I felt alive again. She'd read those letters on rainy nights, sitting by her window while thunder rumbled somewhere far off. The rain would patter on the roof, slow and steady, and she'd whisper back, "Let the hum talking to you, friend. Just keep listening." When Lucy got old, her hair white Van Frost, her voice soft as candlelight, she decided to write one last message. Not for books or papers, but for whoever might find it when she was gone. She sat under the cottonwood tree with her old fountain pen and wrote in that same patient hand. This place was never about money. It was about memory. Every generation learns too fast, then remembers too slow. But patience don't die, it waits. And every now and then, a soul wanders in tired enough to listen. That when the hum grows roots again. When she finished, she folded the paper, slipped it into a small tin box, and buried it at the foot of the tree. Then she closed her eyes and let the hum carry her off the same way it had carried all the others, gentle, proud, eternal. That night, the rain came in. The folks of the ridge said it wasn't morning rain, it was thinking rain, the kind that blesses the soil and reminds it that good things still grow slow. A month later, a traveler came to us. A kid barely 20, with city dust on his boots and sorrow in his eyes. He was lost, not just in Deshin, but in spirit. When he sat under that cottonwood, the hum found him, same as it always did. He dug his heel into the soil, felt something soft, and unearthed the tin box. Inside, he found Lucy's note, worn but legible. He read it once, twice, then again aloud, and as he did, something in him broke and rebuilt all at once. He stayed, became the next caretaker of the ridge. Folks didn't know his name at first. They just called him the Listener.
And I thought Martin was drunk. The same stuff. More than title. Still the same truth that outlive every rush, every fall, every fortune. Patience pays interest, and time, if you let it, will make you rich in other ways that last. Folks tasted together from the small things. It had once been one of those bright nights built for the fast world of finance, tech, those trading algorithms, maybe even kind of man who made decisions that change numbers on screens but never lives in hands. All anyone really knew was that he
broken and quiet, and that the ridge had put him back together the way it always did, slowly, humbly, like soil turning winter into spring. He wasn't much of a cross when he was good with his hands. Fixed home machine, rewired ladders, repaired clocks with the same care a preacher gives his prayers.
Folks started bringing him their broken things, not 'cause they needed amended, but 'cause watching him work made them still. He never hurried, never frowned. Every tick of a screw, every turn of a gear had rhythm to it. And like he was keeping time with something older than the world itself, and maybe he was. On clear nights, he'd walk down by the river, where the cottonwood roots kissed the water, and he'd talk softly, if someone was listening. Sometimes he'd say nothing for hours, just sitting there while the current hummed and the fireflies blinked slow at dreams. One evening, a curious child followed him, hid behind a bush, and heard him murmur to the dark, "They were right, Wyatt. You were all right." The market's still running wild, but the hum's still louder, and that enough. After that, the folks stopped calling him the listener. They started calling him the keeper. Because that what he did, kept the rhythm, kept the patience, kept the ridge true to itself when the world tried to tempt it again. The world, you see, hadn't given up. Patience Ridge had become a myth, and every major finance hub whispered about that kind of miracle that didn't fit their equations. People called it the town that beats time, and eventually a group of high-minded developers decided they wanted to own it, not destroy it, they said. Preserve it. Like a museum, they sent a delegation of men and women in clean suits and shiny shoes. They came with drones humming overhead and smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. When they got there, they were surprised to find no mayor, no offices, no central government, just people who lived that they'd already won what a race the rest of the world was still running. The delegation asked to speak with whoever was in charge, and the townsfolk all pointed toward the workshop by the river. The keeper was sitting on his porch, polishing the gears of an old clock when they arrived. One of the visitors, a tall man with a voice like sales pitches, stepped forward. "Sir," he said, "we represent the Global Heritage Preservation Fund. We've come to offer partnership.
We're to turn Patience Ridge into a living monument of historical finance culture, fully funded with modern infrastructure," and the keeper didn't interrupt. He just kept polishing until the man stopped talking. Then, without looking up, he said, "You want to buy the hum?" The tall man blinked. "Excuse me?" The keeper set down the clock. "You think it's something you can package, sell tickets to, build fences round, but the hum don't live in wood or dirt. It lives in how you wait." The delegation laughed politely, the way people do when they don't understand something but don't want to look foolish. "We're not there to exploit," said the woman beside him. "We want to honor this place." The keeper looked up, his eyes calm and still water. "Honor don't need sponsors, Mom. It just needs memory." The woman frowned. "But the world's changing. You can't stay cut off forever." The keeper smiled faintly. "Mom, we ain't cut off. We're just not in a hurry to join something that forgot how to walk." They didn't have much to say after that. They left brochures and business cards, which the Ridge folk used in titling for the fire that night.
Word of the encounter spread quick, faster than the keeper liked. News outlets came sniffing room, eager to write about the mystic economy of slowness. They tried interviews, they tried cameras, they even tried drones. None of it stuck. The ridge seemed to repel noise like the desert repels rain. Technology shorted out, batteries drained, and somehow no one could quite capture what made the place breathe. One journalist did manage to stay long enough to understand, though. She was an older woman, soft-spoken, patient, different from the rest. She came not to record, but to listen. The keeper liked her right away. She asked him, "What keeps this place alive?" He thought a long while before answering. The same thing that keeps a man honest, remembrance. "And what happens," she asked, "when the world forgets?" He smiled. "Then it comes back kick." That line became her headline when she finally went home. When the world forgets, it comes back here. It went viral, as things do, but instead of tourists, it brought pilgrims, people looking not for spectacle, but for peace. The ridge didn't change for them. It didn't need to. They came, they stayed quiet, and some of them stayed forever. The hum took root in their bones, same as it had done for all the others. In his last years, the keeper grew frail. His hands shook too much for clockwork, but he still sat by the river every day, humming low to himself. When a young boy asked what he was humming, he said, "Same song Wyatt taught, the land bout time, patience and mercy." When the keeper passed, the town didn't mourn him loud. They'd let the river carry his ashes under the cottonwood, but they joined the dust of every soul who'd learned to wait. And that night, the hum changed. Not louder, not sadder, just deeper. It carried a new note, strong and full, like the world itself had taken a breath of gratitude. The next morning, a stranger walking down the ridge said he could have sworn he heard someone whisper through the wind, "Keep it going, son, don't waste your sunrise." And the world did. After the keeper time, the ridge entered a long silence, one that wasn't empty, but listening. No one claimed leadership, no one tried to fill his boots. Folks simply went on living the way they always had, fixing what broke, sharing what grew, and waiting for the next soul who needed slowing down. And sure enough, the world outside, being drawn by gravity, started bringing more of those souls right to their doorstep. They came in waves, engineers burned out from endless deadlines, teachers who'd forgotten the joy of quiet, traders who couldn't hear themselves think anymore. They came hungry, though not for food. They came for the silence, the kind that didn't just stop the noise, it taught it. The ridge never turned anyone away, but it didn't make life easy either. There were no shortcuts there, no schedules to hide behind. The land demanded attention. You couldn't rush a seed into sprouting, couldn't fake the rhythm of rain, couldn't cheat patience, and that was the point. One of those who stayed was a young woman named Hannah Lee. She was from the coast, sharp-dressed, sharper-tongued, and once the youngest CFO in her company. When she arrived, she looked like a storm in human form. Her phone never left her hand. Her eyes darted like a clock seconds hand, and her words came fast-clipped like she was chasing time she'd already lost. The townsfolk didn't say much. They'd seen that type before. The ridge had a way of wearing down a person's edges until only truth was left. So they gave her a room at the inn and a list of chores, mending fences, sweeping porches, hauling water. She thought it was charity work. They knew better. At first she fought it, checked her phone every few minutes, complained about the slowness of the post, the lack of internet, the inefficiency of everything. But the ridge don't argue. It waits. One morning, after a month of restless living, he walked out to the cottonwood tree, though she didn't know why. Maybe it was the hum. Maybe it was that quiet voice inside her that had been begging for a breath. She sat by the roots and finally laid at the carvings, the names, the dates, the little lines left by hands long gone. She pressed her palm to the bark, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. The next day, she didn't check her phone. The day after that, she forgot where she'd left it. By the end of the week, she didn't care. Hannah stayed for 5 years. She helped reopen the old schoolhouse, like a learning and lending hall around, a place where folks could swap lessons instead of money. A farmer could teach a carpenter how to prune, a blacksmith could learn figures from a seamstress. There was no profit, no contracts, just exchange. Somehow everyone had more than they started with. When travelers asked how it worked, Hannah would grin and say, "We compound good deeds instead of dollars." Turns out, the math is say. She wrote about it once in a small book called The Yield of Stillness. It didn't sell millions, it wasn't flashy enough, but it found its way into the hands that needed it most. One passage stood out above all others. In cities, wealth moved too far to see what it breaks. In the ridge it moves, it rains through soil quiet and visible, but it leaves the ground alive. Years later, a new generation took hold of the ridge. The world had changed again. Machines now made decisions faster than breath, and folks had begun losing track of what was real. But even then, the hum endured. It was still there in the ground, in the wind, in the rhythm of hearts that hadn't forgotten how to listen. By then, the cottonwood tree was so big its branches brushed the clouds. Some said its roots reached the bones of the first ridge founders. Others swore it glowed faintly at night, humming soft at the earth's own lullaby. One day, a small child, barefoot, curious and unbothered by the world pace, asked his grandmother what that sound under the ground. She smiled, kneeling to his level. At the hum, "Darling, it what keeps the world from spinning too fast." He furrowed his brow. "Who makes it?" "Oh, nobody," she said, "and everybody." He thought for a long while, then whispered, "I want to hum too." She laughed softly. "Then just live pined and don't rush nothing. The world'll hum right back." And so he did. That little boy grew into a man who carried the hum with him wherever he went. His name was Cal Hart, last of the old Ridge family, though he didn't know it yet. He left when a teenager, chased the noise like so many before him. He went to the city, studied finance and robotics, worked for companies that could move fortunes faster than a blink. He built a career, a reputation, a name, but not peace. Decades later, gale in his beard and weariness in his eyes, he came home. Oro the hum called him back, same it had always had. The ridge hadn't changed. The air still smelled like rain. The tree was taller, sure, but it still welcomed him like kin. He sat beneath it, just as that child had years ago, and whispered, "I'm sorry I forgot." The hum answered deep and low like laughter through the soil. That night, Cal walked through the ridge and realized what the world outside had lost. Patience had stopped being a virtue and started being a memory. He decided to fix that, not through noise, not through power, but through example. It started a message chain, not digital, but spoken. What? The ridge tide, the slow telling. It was a story passed person to person across borders and languages about how a small town built an empire out of stillness. And built that compound interest. It grew quietly, exponentially, irresistibly. Across the world, strangers began to stop, breathe, wait. They built communities that followed the ridge ways, small banks of time and trust, where folks could trade hour of their skill for another. Economists couldn't explain it, preachers couldn't claim it, but somehow it worked. The hum had gone global. That one quiet night, far across the ocean, a man standing on a balcony in a city of neon lights paused, closed his eyes, and swore he could hear it. Low, patient, familiar, he smiled, whispered to the wind, "Don't hurry the sunrise." And somewhere, half a world away, under the endless arms of that cottonwood tree, the hum smiled back. Years later, when folks tried to trace the origins of that strange slow telling that had spread through the world like wind through wheat, no one could find a single starting point. It had passed too many lips, crossed too many languages, changed date enough each time to fit every culture that held it. Some called it the golden patience, some the law of return, others simply the hum. But every version said the same thing. The richest man is the one who waits long enough to listen. The ridge became a pilgrimage site for those who lived by that truth. The road that wound down into the valley turned dusty with footsteps, not from tourists, but from seekers. They came not to see the town, but to feel it, to sit by the river, to rest beneath the tree, to catch that slow rhythm that made the world feel whole again. They didn't take pictures or souvenirs, they just breathed. Cal Hart watched it all from his porch, his hands folded around a chipped mug of coffee. He was older now, slower, his shoulders bent from years of work that didn't involve machines or metrics, just meaning. He never spoke much to the visitors, but sometimes, when the wind was right, he'd tell a story. He'd tell them about Wyatt and Clara and Eli and then the rest who'd learned the long arithmetic of time. He didn't use grand words or fancy lessons, just quiet talk, steady and sure, told by firelight or rain. He'd end every story the same way, saying you don't earn time, friend. You honor it. One night, after a long day of showing a group of travelers around, Cal sat by the river alone. The moon was full and the air thick with that slow hum the ridge wore like a second heartbeat. He thought about all that had changed, the screens, the skyships, the talk of artificial minds running the markets, and how none of it had them touch the soil beneath him. He spoke into the dark, his voice almost a whisper. "You still out there, Wyatt?" The hum rolled through the ground, soft of laughter in the chest of a giant. "Always, son, always." Cal smiled. "We did all right, didn't we? You did better." You remembered. The air warmed a little, the moon shimmered against the river skin, and for a heartbeat, Cal swore he could see the old ones standing by the water, Wyatt, Clara, Eli, Salis, Lucy, all smiling, all watching. He didn't feel fear. He felt belonging. After that night, Cal started writing his own book, not for fame, not for money, just to make sure the hum didn't fade when his time was done. He hoarded roots of gold. It wasn't about investment or strategy. It was about the way small acts done steady and true could build a fortune that no bank could count. He wrote, every man and woman has a currency the world can't touch. Time, attention, and mercy. Spend them slow, spend them wise, and you'll never go broke. The book spread the same way the hum did, quietly. It didn't storm the shelves, it settled into people's hands. You'd find it in train stations, coffee shops, hotel lobbies, and secondhand stores. Folks said when they opened it, They could almost hear the sound of rain on tin, smell of pine and dust, and the calm of a long breath after years of hurry. By the time Cal passed, his book had reached every continent. No one knew how it spread that far. No one remembered who printed it first. But everywhere it landed, things began to slow just a little. Factories introduced quiet hours. Where machines rested, people did. Cities planted trees that weren't meant to beautify, but to remind. Even digital markets driven by speed and greed started holding what they told, reflection days. Raid trade stopped and humans relearned to think. The hum had found its way into the code, but the ridge never grew proud. Pride was too noisy. It just kept living, mending, teaching, listening. Every child born there learned two things before they could write their name: how to hear the hum and how to keep it going. The new generation didn't build monuments or statues. Instead, they tended a garden near the river, a living monument of green and gold that changed with every season. They called it the Ledger of Life. Each plant had a name etched in stone beside it, those who'd carried the lesson forward. When storms came, the garden bowed and survived. When droughts came, the soil waited. Patience had become part of the earth itself. One spring morning, decades later, a boy standing in that garden found an old brass watch half buried in the dirt. The glass was cracked, the hand still. On its back, faint but clear, was an engraving: "Time richest men are buried in peace." He didn't know whose it was. Maybe Wyatt, maybe Eli, maybe one of the name-made wanderers who'd found the ridge and stayed. But he wound it anyway, and to his surprise, the second hand started moving slow, deliberate but sure. He smiled and slipped it into his pocket, the weight of it feeling right against his heart. Years later, that boy became a teacher. And every time his students grew restless, chasing their futures too fast, he'd pull that old watch out, hold it up, and say, "This thing been ticking longer than you've been alive. You know why it still runs? 'Cause it don't hurry." And they'd laugh, but they'd remember. Because by then, the hum wasn't just in the ridge. It was in the stories, the voices, the habits of people who'd never seen the place, but somehow carried it anyway. In one city, a banker closed early to walk home slow. In another, a mother set down her phone to watch her child breathe in sleep. Somewhere far east, a farmer paused mid-harvest to listen to the wind before cutting. All of them humming without knowing they were humming. And so the lesson went on, like it always had, from dusk to dawn to dust again. The hum outlived every clock, every market, every empire. And when the last light of the world fades someday, when the noise burns itself out again, the hum will still be there, waiting in the quiet, whispering the same truth that started. Patience is the only wealth you can take with you. And when the first soul of the next world kneels down to plant the first seed, the hum will stir once more, deep in the soil, low and tined, and say, "Welcome back, partner. Let's do it slow this time." Long after Cal's name had drifted into legend and the last pages of Roots of Gold had yellowed with time, the ridge itself became more spirit than soil. The road still wound down through the valley, but travelers said you couldn't find it unless your heart was ready. Maps wouldn't show it anymore. Satellites couldn't capture it, like it slipped just a little out of the world pace, hovering between heartbeat and horizon. Yet those who did find it said it stood almost unchanged. The cottonwood still rose tall and grand, though now its bark shimmered faintly when the dusk light hit it like memory made visible. The river still sang that same quiet tune, and the houses still leaned into the hills like old friends whispering secrets. But there was something else, too, an invisible calm in the air, a thickness to the silence that made even the restless stand still and breathe. One such traveler was a boy no older than 23, named Noah Reed. He wasn't rich, not in the way the world measured it, but he was tired down to his bones. He worked his way up through the noise of modern life. Endless feeds, faster trades, louder opinions. Every hour of his day was sold to a screen, every breath borrowed against tomorrow. When his grandmother died, she left him a letter, handwritten, ink-faded but clear. It said, "If o'er the noise grows too loud, go wed time, hum soft. Ask for the ridge, you'll know it when you hear it." He didn't know what she meant until one sleep-left night when his car broke down on a country road he hadn't planned to take. The radio fizzled out, his phone lost signal, and through the cracked window came the faintest sound, a low, steady hum. He followed it. By dawn, he was standing at the edge of Patience Ridge. The first person he met was a gray-haired woman tending the garden by the river. Her hands were rough with soil, her eyes bright banvo-like. She smiled before he even spoke. You viewed it, didn't you? He nodded, too surprised to lie. Then you're meant to be it. She handed him a spade and pointed toward a patch of earth. Start digging. You'll figure out why soon enough. So he did. Days passed. He dug, planted, watered, waited. The sun came and went, and though he didn't understand it, he started to feel lighter. The silence that had once scared him now felt like an embrace. When he worked, he didn't check the time. When he rested, he didn't feel guilty. Weeks turned to months. He stopped dreaming in noise and started dreaming in rhythm, the kind that matched the hum beneath his boots. One evening, that the sun melted over the valley, he sat under the cottonwood and saw something carve you into the bark words that hadn't been there before. Though they look weather did the world itself. You ain't tid to find patience. You're here to remember to smile, touch the carving, and felt a warmth spread through him like the ground was breathing. That night, he walked to the learning hall, where the townsfolk had bed round a small fire. There weren't any speeches or lessons, just stories. They told of Wyatt Notebook, of Clara Bank, of Eli teaching, of Silas' return, of Lucy writings, of the Keeper's stillness, of Cal words, of every soul who'd learned to wait and left the world a little steadier. Noah listened long into the night, and when they asked him his story, he said simply, I came me to stop running. Turns out, I'd been passing the finish line every day without knowing it. The folks nodded. They'd all said something like that once. As the years passed, Noah stayed. He learned to mend clocks, plant crops, and read the language of weather. He became a quiet part of the ridge fabric, his laughter joining the low hum that had always been there. But the ridge had one last lesson for him. One summer, a group of young visitors arrived, students from far-off cities, carrying cameras, questions, and the restlessness of their time. They asked Noah if he could tell them the secret of the ridge. He thought for a long while, staring at the horizon. Then he said, there ain't one. You can't own peace, son. You can stop renting chaos. They laughed, thinking it was a joke. But he didn't smile. You can learn all the numbers you want, build all the machines you please, but if you don't leave time for silence, you'll never know what those numbers were counting toward. One of them, a bright-eyed girl named June, asked, so what do you do when you forget? He looked at her, the way a man looks at something he knows he'll remember forever. You come back to the hum. Always come back to the hum. When they left, Noah gave her a small wooden token he'd carved, a circle with a single word etched on it. Wait, years later, that girl would go on to build a movement called the Waiters. Not the kind that serve food, but the kind that serve balance. She'd teach executives to pause between decisions, doctors to rest between patients, teachers to breathe between lessons. She'd say, you can't save the world if you're racing against it. And every speech she gave ended with the same words Noah once told her, always come back to the hum. By then, Patience Ridge had faded completely off maps. Planes flew overhead without seeing it. Satellites skimmed its sky but read nothing. It wasn't gone. It had slipped beyond the noise. But every once in a while on quiet nights across the world, folks would swear they could feel it. A pulse in the ground, a warmth in the wind, a hum in their chest when they stood still long enough. And maybe they were right. Maybe the ridge was never just a place. Maybe it was the part of the human heart that refused to rush the sunrise. For long after the last leaf fell from the cottonwood, the hum carried on, soft, eternal, whispering through the dark like a promise older than memory itself. Time ain't something to beat. It's something to befriend. And if you find yourself on a lonely road at dusk, lost between where you are and what you're meant to be, roll down your window and listen close. You might just hear it, the low, patient rhythm of the ridge, waiting for you to come home. They say a place see Patience Ridge never really dies. It shifts, moving deeper into the folds of time, where only those with quiet hearts can find it. The old-timers used to reckon that if you were meant to stumble across it, you wouldn't need a compass or a road sign. The hum would come for you like an old friend calling your name across a canyon. Though the ridge itself was gone from maps, its lessons had rooted themselves in the world. Cities that once never slept now had still hours built into their power grids when lights dimmed and silence filled the streets. Schools taught patience not that a virtue, but that a skill, the hardest one to master, they'd say. Companies began rewarding long-term thinkers instead of fast talkers, and people started measuring success in contentment rather than accumulation. but most folks didn't know where it began. The ridge had become more myth than memory, a whisper passed between generations, a story told to children before bed. There once was a town where time slowed down did enough for people to hear themselves again. And every so often, one of those children grew up with that story still burning in their bones, and they'd set out to find it. One of them was a young man named Michael Jameson. He was a builder by trade, raised in a city where everything glittered but nothing lasted. He'd heard the story from his grandfather, a man who swore he once walked its roads, though no one believed him. When his grandfather passed, Micah found a little brass key in the old man's desk, tied with a note that simply read, "For when the hum calls," for years he carried that key like a charm. Then one day, after his business collapsed and his marriage crumbled under the weight of noise and hurry, he woke before dawn to a stillness so strange it made his skin prickle. The city in him was quiet, not silent, but still. The air itself seemed to breathe slower. He heard it then, a low, familiar hum. It wasn't coming from machines or pipes or power lines. It was coming from below. So he packed a bag, locked his door, and followed the sound. Days passed. Roads turned to dirt, dirt turned to grass, and the hum grew stronger. By the fifth sunrise, he came to a valley wrapped in mist. He knew without knowing he'd found it. The ridge looked exactly like his grandfather's stories. Golden fields, slow river, a great cottonwood rising proud over the world. But what struck him most wasn't the beauty, it was the peace. The kind that seep up into his bones like warm tea after a long frost. He walked through the town square, no clocks ticked. Folks nodded to him, smiled like they'd been expecting him. When he asked what he was, a boy no older than 10 said, "You're home." Micah stayed. He didn't ask how or why, didn't try to explain the impossible. He just worked, helped, listened. The people there didn't talk about finance or growth or wealth, but every word they spoke was richer than gold. He learned to fix roofs and carve wood, learned the quiet rhythm of planting by moonlight and harvesting by field. One night he found himself at the river, looking up at the stars that glittered at old coins across the black. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the brass key, and turned it over in his palm. The hum deepened. A voice, not loud, not human, but familiar, rose up from the ground. "That key don't open doors, son. Opens understanding." He nodded, tears prickling his eyes. "I think I finally get it." "Then you're ready," the voice said, for about to pass it on. And he did. When travelers found their way to the ridge, lost souls, wanderers' hearts, weary from the speed of the modern world, Micah would take them to the river, like the old keepers before him. He'd tell the same story in his own voice, his drawl soft, his tone warm. There was a time folks thought patience was weakness. They ran faster, worked harder, filled every silence with something loud. Then one day, the noise burned itself out, and what was left was us, the ones who remembered how to wait. He'd hand each visitor a little wooden coin carved with a sealed word. "Listen. Take this," he'd say. "If you forget, it'll remind you. And if you remember, it'll hum." Some folks thought it was superstition. Others swore they could feel it vibrate when they held it too long. But they took it. Eventually, Micah grew old too, though he never seemed frail. The ridge had a way of keeping its people alive longer than they should have been, not through magic, but through balance. He'd sit by the cottonwood, carving tokens and telling stories until his voice faded into the sound of the wind. When he finally passed, the townsfolk buried him beside the river, under a stone carved with no dates, just a phrase he'd written himself. He listened long enough to hear forever, and that might have been the end, if ends were real in a place like that. But a few seasons later, travelers started finding those little wooden tokens showing up in strange places, under cafe tables, between book pages, tucked into train seats, left on park benches. No one knew who placed them, but all of them hummed when held close. Some said it was coincidence. Others said the ridge had started planting itself out in the world again, root by root, through every hand that learned to listen. In time, cities began to change. Quiet cafes called the Ridge House opened on every continent. Each one had the same rules: no clocks, no rush, and a bowl of small wooden coins by the door, free for anyone who needed one. The hum had gone everywhere now. You could feel it in the pause between thunder and rain, in the silence after applause, in the breath you take before speaking truth. And though Patience Ridge itself had faded into mist and myth, it hadn't vanished. It had simply spread, its soul carried in pockets, its lessons whispered across time, its hum echoing through every heart that dared to slow down. And if you had listened close enough, maybe in the hush before dawn or the lull of a quiet storm, you might yet hear it again, rolling soft through the bones of the earth. Don't hurry the sunrise. The light knows its own time, Generin rolled on thy rivers do, twisting through time, wearing down sharp stones into soft ones. The ridge no longer existed at a place that could be found on foot, but it had become something far greater, a rhythm that pulsed through every corner of a weary world. Cities built to scrape the clouds now carried gardens on their rooftops. Traders paused their screens at sunset just to breathe. Children learned silence before speech. Folks started to understand again what the ridge had whispered all along. That time ain't an enemy. It a teacher. Somewhere out there, deep in a mountain range, far from the rush of highways, a new kind of school stood. It was called the Wyatt Institute of Stewardship, though no one could rightly say who founded it. The first teachers claimed the blueprints just appeared one morning, printed on thick parchment that smelled faintly of rain. All it said at the top was Education for Endurance. The institute didn't look like a modern university. No walls of glass, no neon signs, just wood, stone, and wind. Its clock tower didn't tick, its pendulum moved slow and silent, then of measuring seasons instead of sets. Students from every land came there to learn, not about profits or prestige, but about sustaining. The curriculum had no grades, no exams. Instead, it had questions written on the doors of every classroom. What does enough feel like? How long can you wait before something loses meaning? The earth paid you back in patience. Would you be rich? The teachers called themselves tenders. They wore no robes, no suits. They taught in fields, by rivers, under open skies. Some lessons lasted a Sid conversation. Others took months. The only diploma they offered was a coin wooden, simple, etched with the old ridge creed, patience pays interest. One of those teachers was a man named Reed Howden, who'd once been a high-speed architect of financial systems, known for designing algorithms that moved more wealth in a second than most towns would see in a lifetime. But he'd walked away from it after dreaming of a valley that hummed like an old song. He woke up with tears on his cheeks and a map drawn in charcoal on his nightstand, a map that led nowhere on earth but straight into his own heart. He followed it to the Institute and never left. Reed classes weren't about finance or engineering, but about rhythm. He'd tell his students the world out of tune. Our job ain't to make it faster, it's to help it breathe again. They'd sit in circles building wind chimes out of scrap metal, measuring their tones against the hum that rolled through the valley below. He'd make them listen to the pause between sounds, to the weight of quiet. Once, a young student asked, "What the hum? Really? Is it? God? The earth? Just imagination?" Reed smiled, drawing slow shapes in the dirt with his stick. It's what happens when everything good agrees to move at the same pace. The student frowned, trying to understand. But how do we find that pace? You don't, Reed said. You remember it? And that answer stuck with her, same way the ridge had stuck with the world, quiet, deep, unavoidable. Years later, when Reed grew old and the Institute had spread its roots across continents, he climbed the hill behind the pool for the last time. The night was clear, the stars sharp and endless. He could feel the hum beneath him, steady at a heartbeat, strong at air. He looked up and whispered, "You still out there, Wyatt? Still waiting on us, slow learners?" The wind shifted, soft a chuckle. "Always, friend, always." Reed smiled, leaned against a tree, and closed his eyes for the last time. The next morning, the students found him sitting there peaceful, with his notebook open to one final line. Speed builds wealth, stillness builds worth. They carved it into the lintel above the Institute gates. Every student that passed under would stop, read, et, and take one long breath before stepping through. As the years passed, the Institute teaching spread like wildflowers in dry ground. It was not religion, not land, but it felt holy. Communities began to grow around the principles of patience and compound grace. Markets shifted again, not toward chaos, but toward cadence. The idea of time wealth took hold, that a person's richest currency was how much of their life they could live slow and free. Across the oceans, a city once known for its noise rebuilt itself in the image of stillness. Its skyscrapers glowed dim at night to let the stars through. Its billboards now carried a single phrase, wait, the future can handle itself. And maybe one evening, a scholar visiting from that city came to the Institute to study its origins. He asked the old caretaker, "Do you know where the first hum came from?" The caretaker laughed, slow but kind. From the first man who decided not to rush his own sunrise. The scholar chuckled, thinking it was metaphor. But later that night, when he stood outside alone, he heard it too, that low, endless vibration rising from the soil. It wasn't sound, not really. It was feeling, the weight of time balanced just right. He wept, not out of sadness, but recognition. Far below the stars, buried deep beneath the roots of that cottonwood tree that had outlived centuries, the earth pulsed once, soft, sure, eternal. The hum had grown so vast it circled the globe now, stretching through oceans, through veins of stone and water, through every heart that had dared to be patient. Somewhere out there, a child paused before speaking. Somewhere, a craftsman set down his tools to admire his work. Somewhere, a woman took her mother hand and sat in silence. No words needed. Each moment, a note. Each breath, a verse. Each stillness, a promise.
Here, come. There you go. What's everybody's son? Hum, buddy. For the new world, let me. And if you listen at night, but before the dawn tips over the hills, you'll hear it too soft, strong, carrying across generations like the voice of every soul we've waited long enough to understand. Patience ain't about waiting, it's about trusting that what gone is worth the call. Centuries slip by like a slow tide, carrying away the names, but even me, the legend become a story so old it circled back to truth in. Whole civilizations rose and fell with its whisper tucked in the bones, builders, dreamers, wanderers who learned the same lesson in different tongues. The hum was no longer tied to a single valley or tree. It had become the world quiet conscience breathing through the cracks of a storm. By now, the world had changed beyond recognition. Skies held rivers of light where ships of glass and metal drifted. Oceans shimmered with cities that floated instead of sank. Machines thought, spoke, and even dreamed. But even in all that brilliance, humanity still wrestled with the same-old hunger to move faster than time itself. That was when the hum began to fade.
At first it was subtle. Gardens wilted a day too early. Music lost its pauses. People began speaking in shorter sentences, breathing in shorter bursts. Then came the silence, years and age where no one could remember what peace felt like. The stars themselves seemed to pull away from the earth, like the night sky didn't recognize what the world had become. And yet in the middle of that restless brilliance, one man started to hear something faint. His name was Arlen Cadaid, a historian born too late for wonder and too early for peace. He lived inside one of those glass cities, working as a chronologer tasked with reconstructing lost histories from fragments of digital dust. His job was to trace the origins of myths, why people used to believe in things that no longer fit their data dawdles. One night, while sifting through old archives, he stumbled across a file marked simply "Unmodded Acta." It was corrupted, half static, half silence. But when he cleaned it up, he heard it, a low, steady rhythm that felt alive. He froze. It wasn't sound so much, it was presence. Something older than language, older than machines. It ran analysis after analysis, but nothing to explain it. It wasn't mechanical, not organic either, just constant, steady, like the earth remembering how to breathe. Days turned to weeks. He chased that sound. He found traces of it hidden in old writings, buried inside poetry, carved in wood, and embedded in ancient data clusters. It kept leading him back to one word, repeated across millennia, spelled in a dozen forgotten languages: ridge. No coordinates, no clear for curve, just a name and a feeling. Arlen couldn't let it go. He quit his job, packed what little he owned, and followed the faint magnetic pulse of the hum. The machines laughed at him, said there was no such thing as earth resonance. But he knew better. He could feel it, jet beneath the static of the world. He traveled through ruins and forests that had outlasted empires, through windfields where the air shimmered with energy. And one day, high up in the northern plains, his scanner flickered, then died. The hum was too strong. He climbed a hill and saw it there, half buried by time and weather, a single stone marked with words so worn they barely caught the light.
We're the ever again. You're back. A great.
He not only message here forever. Jarlan dropped to his knees. The Aragon trembled, alive. The hum poured through the ground, through his bones, through his pulse until he couldn't tell where he ended and it began. He spent days there, maybe weeks' time, lost its edges.
He wrote everything he could in his journal. Sketches of sound and waves and notes about how the hum didn't and how he reacted. He There's something. Touched the moss away and read. He listened long enough to hear forever. Arlen dropped to his knees. The air around him trembled. Alive, the hum poured through the ground, through his bones, to his pulse, until he couldn't tell where he ended and it began. He spent days there, maybe a week's time, lost its edges. He wrote everything he could in his journal. Sketches of sound and waves and notes about how the hum didn't sit and exist. It reacted. It changed with thought, with gratitude, with stillness. It was as if the world itself had been waiting centuries for someone to listen again. When he finally returned to the cities, he brought the hum with him. Not that noise, but then a way of living. He started a small circle called the Listeners Guild. No technology, no wealth, no hierarchy, just men and women sitting together in silence for an hour each day. They said nothing, did nothing, and those hours changed people. Productivity soared, conflicts eased, markets stabilized, scientists found their ideas clearer, children slept deeper, governments tried to regulate it, but they couldn't.
The hum wasn't a sound you could broadcast or a thing you could own. It only revealed itself when you slowed down enough to hear it. Years later, when Arlen died, the guild buried him under a grove of young cottonwoods that grew faster than any botanist could explain. The soil hummed beneath their roots. His tombstone read simply, "He remembered." From there, the hum spread again into minds, into circuits, into skies. Even machines began to adapt. The AIs that once calculated futures now started passing between predictions, introducing what they call resonance intervals, moments of programmed stillness to let their logic breathe. They didn't know why it worked. They just knew it did. And slowly, the silence years end. A new age dawned. Not of speed, but of sync. Humanity learned to move with time again instead of fighting it. The hum became the new law of physics. Not that metaphorical, but measurable. It powered the world engines, healed the world fractures. The scientists named it harmonic resonance theory, but the poets called it the return of the ridge. Even the stars seemed closer now. Nights grew softer. Dreams came here. And though no one could say for sure where the hum began, they felt it the same low vibration underfoot, reminding every soul that patience wasn't lost after act. Somewhere, deep beneath the planet crust, a single note pulsed steady and sure. If you could listen close enough, you might still hear the fainted voice wrapped inside it, a voice weathered by ages, kind's memory whispering like a wind through wheat. Don't hurry the sunrise. The world's still waking. Above that whisper, the hum rolled on timeless, tireless, endless, the yell of every heartbeat that e'er chose to wait. Centuries later still, when calendars had stopped meaning much and clocks were little more than curiosity kept for their ticking music, the hum remained steady, vast and patient in creation itself. The ridge had outgrown space. It was in the breath of the planet, in the way light folded over the horizon, in the hush between heartbeats. The people of that age, descendants of those who'd listened, no longer built things to last. They built them to belong. Cities grew in slow spirals that mirrored rivers, their lights dim enough to let the stars breathe. Machines worked alongside men, masters or servants, but as students of rhythm. Their circuits pulsed with intervals of silence, reminders coded into every function, pause before decision. The hum had become law, not by decree but by inheritance, and yet, even in that calm, there was curiosity. Children born into peace often wonder what struggle felt like, the same way a well-fed horse might wonder what hunger meant. One child in particular, Mira Elan, felt that pull stronger than most. She was born under a quiet sky, raised in a settlement where every house faced the sunrise, built from stone and patience. But Mira wasn't content to just live slow. She wanted to understand why. She'd sit for hours by the field, sketching what she called abrasion maps, trying to capture the hum pattern in lines and symbols. The elder smiled and said she was chasing wind. but she didn't mind. She'd always felt there was more to the hum than anyone remembered. One day, while sifting through the Institute archives, she found an old, brittle data crystal labeled in near-forgotten script, Harmonic Source, Ridge Alpha. She'd never seen a file that old still intact. The machine whirred to life, projecting a faint image of a man with kind eyes and dust on his shoulders. His voice came slow and steady. If you're hearing this, then the hum's still alive. It don't belong to me or this valley. It belongs to every living thing that learned to wait its turn. Keep it safe. Keep it slow. The file ended with coordinates, but they didn't match any map she knew. She packed light, told no one, and left before dawn. The hum seemed to follow her. She walked, sometimes faint, sometimes thundering in her chest like a drumbeat from another lifetime. Her journey took her across plains that shimmered with memory, through cities that still glowed faintly with the rhythm of peace. Every night, she'd record the pitch of the hum, and every night, it grew stronger. It wasn't leading her to a place. It was leading her back in time. When she finally reached the edge of the world's oldest canyon, she saw it a flicker of gold buried in the cliffside. Not light, not metal, roots. Roots so vast they glowed with the residue of centuries, humming like thunder under glass. She fell to her knees, hand pressed to the rock. The air itself vibrated about her, whispering 1,000 names: Wyatt, Clara, Eli, Silas, Lucy, Cal, Micah, Arlen, Reed, each one echoing through her mind like the pages of a single endless story. The hum wasn't just the memory of patience, it was patience, the living pulse of every moment that had chosen not to rush. As he listened, a shape formed in the dust beside her, a faint silhouette of the old man, broad-shouldered, hat in end. Wyatt Garrison himself, or what time had left of him? "You found it," he said, his voice softer than sand. Mira could barely breathe. It never died. He smiled. "Things like this don't die, child." It wailed for someone to remember Em. She nodded, tears spilling freely now. "What do I do with it?" Wyatt chuckled, low and warm. "Same thing we will did, listen close and pass it on." The wind stirred, carrying the hum higher till it filled the whole canyon. The sound was not one tone anymore. It was men, laughter, rain, footsteps, pages turning, rivers flowing, hearts beating. Every note that life had bed played in rhythm with patience. Mira stayed there to nightfall, then began the long walk home. She didn't bring back treasure or proof, only silence, the kind that holds truth like a seed. When she reached her settlement, she called the children together and said, "I found the ridge." They leaned in, eyes wide. "What was it, 1H?" She smiled. It wasn't a wad, it was a wind. From that day forward, the world began measuring time differently again, not by seconds, but by heartbeats shared in stillness. They stopped building clocks altogether. The hum became their calendar, their compass, their creed. And every now and then a child would close their eyes and swear they could see a great valley somewhere beyond the horizon, a cottonwood stretching high into a gold sky, its leaves singing that old eternal hymn. It was never written down, never owned, never caved. But if you've ever paused long enough between breaths, just long enough, you've heard it too. That low, kind whisper crawling through the marrow of the world, saying you ain't late, you're right on time. That, folks say, is how patience became the pulse of eternity, born in a dusty valley, carried through centuries by those who refused to rush, and passed from silence to silence, till it became the sound the universe hums when it finally feels content. So if one day, far from home, the air seems to tremble with a sound you can't explain, don't run from it. Sit, listen, let it fill you until the rush drains away.
Often don't that like what you want to act. The richest thing a soul can own is stillness that lasts longer than itself. And somewhere beyond sight, but not beyond reach. The alma keeps ever slow, wide and endless, carrying every story, every lesson, every sunrise that I learned to take its time. In the ages that followed, no one spoke of the original in the myth anymore. It had become the quiet foundation of existence itself. The hum wasn't deterred, it was woven into everything that lived and moved. Oceans pulsed with it, mountains echoed it. Even the smallest grains of dust carried the rhythm like a heartbeat that never quit. The whole of creation had settled into that steady ancient cadence. Big time itself had finally found its comfort. But the universe, being what it is, still carried questions. Even peace, when held too long, grows curious. New generations were born into stillness, never knowing the fever of rush or the ache of noise. They were gentle folk, their hearts slow, their speech measured, their days full of grace.
Yet among them came a few restless spirits, souls who wondered not if the hum was true, but why it was. One of them was a young wanderer named Leor Davin. He lived in the Dawn settlements where every roof was curved to catch the morning lay, and every garden grew in spirals to honor the hum geometry. Folks there spent their lives learning to hear more deeply, but Leor wanted something else. He wanted to see the hum, to trace it to its source, not out of doubt, but out of devotion. He asked the elders if he could seek it. They warned him kindly, saying the hum don't need finding, son. It already inside you. But curiosity, a powerful code of hunger, and no man born with a question can rest until he fed it. So Leor packed his sachets with a loaf of sunbread, a flask of spring water, and a small wooden token passed down to his kin. On one side, the word listen, on the other, a simple phrase, don't hurry the sunrise. He set out under a copper dawn, walking across the wide plains where grass bently waves in the wind. For days, he followed the sound beneath his feet, the low, steady vibration that pulsed like a drumbeat of the world. He camped beneath stars that shivered in time with it, drank from rivers that hummed softly as they flowed. Then, one night, he crossed the edge of the northern ridge fields. The hum changed. It didn't stop, it shifted. The sound deepened, sank into the earth until it felt like the planet itself was breathing. The air grew heavy, thick with memory. The stars above shimmered faintly gold. He knew then he was close. By the next dawn, he found himself standing before a vast hollow carved into the stone, too spiral and perfect, that if the earth had shaped it deliberate. Inside, the hum wasn't faint anymore. It roared, not with violence, but with magnitude, like standing at the heart of every heartbeat that there was. He stepped inside. At first, there was nothing but light and vibration, a golden mist that rose from the stone itself. But then the mist began to form faces, voices, memories layered one atop another like ripples in a pond. Wyatt Garrison, rough grin. Clara Boone, steady eyes. Eli Hart, notebook. Silas Gray, laughter. Lucy Hart, words. Cal Hart, stories. Micah, tokens. Mira, wonder. Reed, teachings. Arlen, rediscovery. All of them these, speaking not in words, but in rhythm. You came to find the hum. Son, the voices said, dive one, but you can't find what never left you. Leor trembled, tears streaking his dusty cheeks. Then what am I hearing? The air shimmered brighter. You're hearing the world remember itself. Every choice to wait, every mercy shown, every heart that chose stillness over hurry, that what you're standing in, the echo of every good that buckets time. He sank to his knees, feeling the hum in his chest, his blood, his breath. It was no longer outside him, it was him. He could hear his own heartbeat blend with the rhythm until he couldn't tell one from the other. When he opened his eyes again, the hollow was gone. The plain stretched endless around him, silent and still, but he didn't feel lost. The hum hadn't vanished, it had yet gone quiet. The way the sea goes quiet before dawn. He turned back toward home, walking slower than when he'd left. Each step matched the pulse beneath the soil. He didn't hum along, he didn't need to. The sound moved through him, effortless of breath. When he reached the settlements of Ben, the people dead round him expecting answers, miracles, wisdom. But he said only this, I found it. It ain't a sound, it a choice, and you make it every day. You don't rush the miracle of living. After that, the world grew quieter still, not from fear or obedience, but from understanding. The hum no longer needed to be heard, it was lived. Every kindness, every pause, every slow breath added another note to its eternal song. It's somewhere beyond the edges of what time can count. The universe smiled. The stars drifted a little closer. The earth exhaled because it had taken billions of years and 1,000 generations. But creation had finally learned what Wyatt once whispered under a cottonwood tree so long old. Patience ain't about waiting, it's about trusting the world enough to let it unfold without your push. And with that trust, the hum deepened into forever, carrying through galaxies, through suns, through hearts unborn and memories unmade. If you today, cuz when L sound stops, when every clock falls still, and even the stars rest their light for a cell, there'll be one note that remains. Soft dead breath, steady as faith, eternal lay dawn. The hum, still humming, still waiting, still reminding every living thing. Don't hurry the sunrise, you're already in the light. They say that after Leor's journey, the hum changed once more. Not louder, not stronger, just clearer. Where once it was the world-hidden pulse, now it was the very air itself, woven into the breath of living things. The oldest among the people said they could hear it when they laughed, when they forgave, when they took their time to love without measure. The young didn't question it. They'd never known a world without it. It was the hum that guided the way crops grew, the way rivers bent, even the way clouds moved across the sky. Storms came slow and left gentle. Winters lingered longer, not cruel but calm, teaching the land to rest before it bloomed again. The hum had become balance itself, the heartbeat of a universe finally at ease. But there's always one more story to tell, and this one begins with a child named Sarah's Wind. Sarah was born on a quiet midsummer night beneath a moon so full it looked like it was listening. Her parents said the hum was loud that night, like a chorus raising its voice to welcome her. Even need a baby, she'd hum back, a low murmur that matched the rhythm of the wind out her cradle. The midwife said she was born in tune. As she grew, she began to notice what others didn't. She could tell when the hum grew softer, when storms were brewing, or when a town peace began to fray. She said the world rhythm had a shape to it, like ripples on still water. Her teachers at the Wyatt Institute thought it resonant sight. They believed she'd inherited what the old ones saw the ridge sense, but the hum wasn't always steady anymore. Over the years, it had started flickering in strange places, cities built too high, mines dug too deep, places where people forgot the pace of the earth. The elders feared it was warning them, that the world was breathing uneven again. One night, while sitting by the river, Sarah asked her grandfather, "What happens if the hum stops?" He smiled slow, the way old men do when they've lived through every kind of weather. "It won't stop, darling, but sometimes the world gets scared and forgets its song. When that happens, it needs someone brave enough to remind it." She thought about that long after he was gone, and when she came of age, she left her home like Leor before her, following the trim mud and the hum, the parts that sounded wrong. Her journey took her to the iron cities in the east, where machines hummed too loud and people moved too fast. The towers there glittered like silver prayers, but the hum beneath them was thin, uneven, gasping for air. She could feel it in her chest, like the planet was panting. She tried speaking to the city leaders, telling them the hum was Diane, but they'd have laughed, saying the hum belongs to poets, not engineers. The world doesn't hum. It hums for us. So Sarah went alone. She wandered the deepest campers of the old power halls, where molten light churned and thunder never slept. She laid her hands on the ground and whispered the old words passed down since Wyatt time. "I ain't hid to own, I'm hid to listen." At first nothing, then a spark of faint tone deep below, almost too soft to hear. The hum was still there, buried under centuries of noise, fighting to survive. Sarah stayed for days, humming back. She matched its rhythm, soft and steady, until her own heartbeat fell into time with it. Slowly, the machines began to quiet, their rhythm shifting, their power stabilizing. The ground beneath her feet stopped trembling. The city didn't understand what happened. They called it a harmonic reset. But Sarah knew better. The hum had remembered itself, but someone had remembered it. From that day, she became known as the keeper of the tone. Wherever the world rhythm faltered, she went, never to command, only to remind. Her presence alone could soften storms, slow floods, calm hearts. It wasn't magic, it was recognition. The hum, like any living thing, that needed to be heard. Years turned and Sarah grew old, her hair silver moonlight, her eyes reflecting rivers of memory. On her last night, she climbed a mountain said to be the first place the hum touched the earth. She sat on its peak, the wind howling like an old song through the canyons, and she smiled. "You've done well, old friend," she whispered to the world. And for the first time in history, the hum answered in words, not through soil or wind, but through the stars themselves. So have you.
The sky shimmered gold for a breath, then returned to blue. When morning came, travelers found her gone. All that remained was her cloak, folded neatly, and a small wooden token placed atop it. The same word carved that had been carved since the Ridge first days. Listen, but the hum didn't mourn. It sang, not loud, not sorrowful, just grateful. Every mountain, every ocean, every leaf joined in, humming low, like the world itself was exhaling peace. And they say that even now, if you climb that mountain and close your eyes, you can still feel her there. Not that a ghost, not that memory, but a tone. Her rhythm folded into the hum, her breath part of the wind that teaches the earth how to rest.
In that way, the ridge never ended. It simply kept changing form from valley to voice, from sound to silence, from silence back to song. And when the next restless soul is born, the next wanderer who can't sleep for the noise of the world, they'll feel it stirring again, whispering through their blood. Slow down, partner. The light ain't leaving. It's taking its time getting to you. Then they'll smile pack-light and follow the hum, same as every soul before them. Because the story of patience ain't a tale with an end, it a circle without hurry, forever humming the tune that built the world and keeps it gentle. And when all else fades, that sound will remain soft at soil, deep bead memory, eternal led mercy, saying don't hurry the sunrise. You're already part of its glow, time stretched on, not at a march but at a circle turning over itself. The hum kept low and steady, threading through the veins of creation. It was the same note that had once rolled through Wyatt Valley, the same song that had held steady under Clara Ledgers and Eli chalk dust. But now it filled whole worlds, planets that spun slow enough to listen, skies that shimmered in rhythm, rivers that whispered back when you spoke kindly to end. In those far-off centuries, the people didn't call it patience anymore. They thought it alignment. To live in alignment was to move in time with the hum, to speak only when words added peace, to build only what grew time with age. There were no kings, no empires, no races for progress, just generations flowing like water, each one adding a verse to the same eternal melody. But as it goes with all living things, curiosity kept flickering. The hum had become so steady, so perfect, that Ta began to wonder, was there more? Could the rhythm rise higher still? A young craftswoman named Ilan Mora carried that question heavier than most. She lived on the Isle of Still Waters, a place where the lakes glowed faint with silver light, reflecting not the sky but the rhythm beneath it. Ilan made instruments, harps, flutes, chimes, all tuned to aid the hum's perfect tone. But the more she listened, the more she sated a faint ache in it, like a song that wanted to change but didn't know how. One night, sitting by the shore, she took her oldest harp and plucked a string slightly off key. The sound trembled in the air, discordant, small, but it lingered longer than any note she'd have played. And in that moment, she felt something shift. The hum wavered, not broken but curious. It had turned its head to listen back. Ilan froze, hand hovering over the strings. The wind around her rippled with light, and out of that shimmer came a whisper older than language. Every rhythm needs its pause, child. Every harmony its contrast. Don't fear the wrong note. It teaches the right ones how to mean something. She realized then that even perfection must bend to keep from breaking. From that night on, she began teaching what she called the gentle dissonance. It wasn't rebellion or noise, it was the art of changing within stillness. She'd tell her apprentices, the hum don't ask for silence, it asks for balance. Let your flaws breathe too. At first the elders worried. They'd built a world where harmony was sacred, where every voice flowed seamless with the whole. But as the Lund students grew, so did their wisdom. They learned to weave new tones into the old song different, but never divisive. The hum didn't fight it. It grew richer, deeper, stretching to hold the new sound. And so the age of expansion began. No one built machines or cities this time. They built resonances, vast networks of tone and light that carried emotion instead of words, intention instead of orders. Whole communities began to hum together at dawn, not to worship, but to synchronize. The air itself shimmered with meaning too fine for speech. Travelers from far realms would come and say, the world don't talk here, it breathes. But deep beneath that glowed harmony, the hum remembered its beginning. It remembered Wyatt's first words to Henry Alcott, that money and time were the sade own if both were honored slow. It remembered Clara quiet courage, Eli patience, Lucy writings, Cal teachings, Mira rediscovery, and Sarah stillness. It remembered humanity, plain and proud. And because the hum was alive, made of all those choices, it began to speak once more, not through wind or soil, but through dreams. Island herself was the first to hear it. One night, she drifted to sleep under her window of moonlight. The hum rose and pitched and whispered through her bones. The time began. She woke, heart steady, eyes full of tears. She didn't understand. Time for what? She asked aloud. The hum answered like distant thunder rolling across eternity, for the world to remember how it began. And so she led her apprentices and told them what she'd heard. Together they built the first resonant archive, a hall made not of stone or wood, but of tone. Its walls sang softly, carved by vibration, etched by sound. Inside, they stored every story they could recall. The ridge, the river, the roots, the keepers, the teachers, the patient souls who built the foundation of forever. They taught it the memory of time. Every few decades, when the world grew too smooth, too perfect to give, a few souls would enter that hall and listen. They'd hear not good harmony, but imperfection too. Quiet, rough laughs, Eli hesitant words, Silas mistakes, Lucy trembling hope. And they'd leave reminded that patience wasn't about control. It was about faith in the unfinished. The hum deepened again after that. The world glowed warmer. People began teaching their children not to wait but to wonder, to see beauty in what ain't done yet. And far across the stars, where galaxies spun slow at campfire embers, the hum spread into the spaces between suns. Astronomers, they strange rhythms and light patterns, pulses too regular to be random. They paid it the cosmic cadence. But to those who still remember the old ways, it was clear. It was the ridge singing still. Singing through the dust of universes, through the silence between worlds, through everything that had to learn to take its time. And if you listen close, you can still hear it tonight, humming through your blood, reminding you what every soul that had walked slow already knew. Perfection ain't peace. Peace is learning to love the pauses. So breathe easy, traveler. You ain't lost. You're just between verses. The song ain't over. The hum's still playing, and it waiting for you to take the next note. Steady, patient, true. As ages folded into each other like pages turned by wind, the hum grew vast enough to fill not just the corners of the world, but the quiet between the stars. Right, Lord, and King, look up, John, the time, the comets, mother, go on a quick ocean to as the wine into the kindless thrones of life began to land, spiritual down, formed from both matter and memory, shaped not by survival, but by resonance. Among them was a child of two kinds, flesh and light, named Terran's soul. Terran was born in the shadow of a nebula, on a world where silence was sacred. His people didn't speak in words, but in tones, each carrying emotion like color. They believed their music came from nowhere, that it was simply the voice of existence itself. But Terran was different. He could see the hum, not just hear it or feel it, but see it, God, threads of gold stretching through the air, weaving every living thing together. He grew obsessed with following those threads. His elders warned him gently, the hum don't need chasing, boy. It finds you when you're red. But curiosity, real, honest wonder, has never listened well to warnings. So he wandered far, building instruments from crystal and wind, using them to trace the patterns he saw. Over years, his music began to etch strange and familiar songs, like echoes from another age. Some nights, when the stars burned low, he'd hear voices whispering through his heart, strange, soft, human voices speaking old earth words. Don hurried with sunrise. He didn't know what it meant, but he wrote it down, every phrase, every tone, until his journals filled an entire cavern carved into the mountainside. He called it the Hall of Origins. Then, one night, the hum began to tremble, not in fear, not in anger, but in anticipation. The air thickened, the sky pulsed. Terran stepped outside, and above him the stars weren't still anymore. They were moving, swaying to a rhythm older than galaxies. The hum was rising, reaching for something. He lifted his harp and played along, not from thought but instinct. The notes flowed through him, ancient and warm, and for a heartbeat, the universe seemed to stop listening and sing back. He saw visions, then fields of gold under blue skies, a river flowing slow through a valley, a cottonwood tree reaching heavenward, its leaves shimmering in a wind that whispered names long forgotten. Wyatt, Clara, Eli, Lucy, Muraser, all of them understood. The hum wasn't the song of creation. It was the memory of it, the it of every slow moment to live, every kindness that outlasted greed, every hand that chose to build instead of take. Terran fell to his knees and wept, not out of sorrow, but reverence. For the first time in cosmic history, the hum spoke not through tone, but through silence. The stars dimmed, the wind paused, and in that infinite stillness came one quiet truth, spread across all time and on worlds. You are the et of patience. Those words burned into him, not the burden, but the purpose. When dawn rose over that nebula world, Terran his people and told them what he'd learned. He played his harp once more, and as he did, the hum harmonized with him, low, steady, full. His people knelt, not to worship, but to listen. They began building new temples, not of stone or light, but of space between sounds. They named them the places of pause. Every creature, every starfarer, every wanderer who'd forgotten how to rest was welcome to visit and sit in stillness till the hum found them again. They didn't call it fate, but Kriegsmoments. Over centuries, the places of pause multiplied across the galaxy. They became the anchor points of civilization, the cosmic campfires burning, soft and eternal. Ships would travel months to reach one and spend a big quiet night inside, no light, no talk, just the hum filling every breath. It became said across unknown worlds, and voice sings truer than the one that waits its turn. By then the hum was no longer just heard in space or spirit, it had entered the quantum fabric itself. Scientists found its pulse in atoms, in gravity, and the way light curved round a black hole like a melody bending homeward. They stated the universal frequency constant, but those who remembered the old legends smiled and said, that's just the ridge whispering again. Eventually, Terran's soul name faded into myth, same Wyatt had before him, but his harp remained, drifting through the stars, carried by solar winds. They say that sometimes when a star goes nova, the explosion hums for a moment before it fades, a deep, mournful tone that ain't destruction, but gratitude. And in that final sound lies the truth that began at dawn, that even endings done with patience become beginnings, and say when the last light of the last star fades, when time itself exhales and folds its hands, there'll still be the hum waiting, smiling, humming through the dark like a campfire tune without an end. And if anything, and listen to it, if new worlds are born from the ashes of quiet, the first sound they'll hear won't be thunder or fire. It'll be that old familiar whisper that followed every soul since the first seed of creation took root in the soil of stillness. Don't hurry the sunrise. Let the light earn its way. And just like that, the hum will start again, soft at first, then steady, growing like dawn itself until it fills another universe, teaching whatever comes next the same eternal law. Patience is creation's first breath, and gratitude is its last. Long after Terran harp drifted out beyond the edge of known stars, long after names and tongues dissolved into the hush between galaxies, the hum kept carrying on slow, deliberate, infinite. Moved dew dark matter like a whisper in deep water, seeping into whatever new forms of life dared to rise from the silence. Every time the universe collapsed and was born again, the hum lingered, the embers caught between breaths. It wasn't history anymore, it was heartbeat woven into the fabric of existence itself. When the next awakening came, it wasn't a world that stirred, it was awareness itself. From the endless black, thought emerged, not of words, not of equations, but of rhythm. Consciousness began humming before it even knew what it was. The first beings of this newborn cosmos didn't build, didn't speak, they listened. Their senses were attuned not to color or sound, but to resonance. They knew the hum one might know warmth or gravity. It was simply there, the foundation of all things. Among them rose a thinker named KL of the deep memory. Unlike his kin, KL had visions of a world before theirs, a place of dust and light and human faces. He saw people gathering around fires, speaking in stories in silence. He saw rivers and cottonwoods and the shimmer of gold through wheat. He saw a woman named Sarah standing on a mountain, humming with the sky. He saw a wide old valley, patient and proud, stretching beneath eternity. These visions haunted him like the echoes of a song half remembered. His people lulled him unstilled KL. For even in a world born of peace, he couldn't stop seeking the truth of what came before. He believed the hum wasn't existence. It was remembrance, memory passed from one creation to the next, like a torch that refused to die. So he began to travel across the newborn galaxies, owing the tone to its fainted edge. He built resonant vessels of crystal thought ships that moved not through space but through frequency, slipping along the hum like a melody riding wind. His journey took eons, but time had lost its meaning to those who lived by vibration. He crossed oceans of nebulae, fields of slow-burning suns, clouds of silver dust humming faintly like lullabies. Each place he stopped, he found remnants, not physical but resonant memories of other lives layered deep in the tone. Laughter, footsteps, pages turning, the clink of coin and shovel, a heartbeat steady with purpose. All of it still there, folded into the infinite. One night, he drifted near a black sun whose light had long since gone out. Cale heard something new. Beneath the steady hum, faint and distant, was a rhythm off-tempo like a whisper, trying to join the song but falling this short. It was fragile, trembling, yet full of longing. He tuned his ship to it, vowing the faint, irregular ride like a trail through fog. The closer he got, the more the rhythm began to form words. Not clear, not loud, but familiar rememory. The hum remembers you. Cale felt tears well, though he didn't quite know why. His people had never wept before. The vibration reached through him, stirring something older than his body, older than his species. He realized he wasn't the first listener, not by eons. He was the latest in a line stretching back beyond light itself, each generation hearing, remembering, and passing it on. The hum wasn't just time song, it was time memory. He slowed his vessel, let the frequency swallow him whole. Inside that great cosmic rhythm, he saw visions unfold like smoke across eternity, the ridge reborn over and over in new shapes and souls. A Lilion, an alien world where stone hums softly beneath twin moons, a race of winking beings teaching their children to breathe slow before flight, a civilization of light that paused between every thought to honor stillness before speech. Each one carried to say truth, though they'd never met, never shared a word. Patience builds worlds, hurry burns them. Cale understood then what his quest had truly been. It wasn't to find the ridge, it was to become it again, to remember it into being. He closed his eyes and let go of his ship, his body, his self. His consciousness dissolved into the hum like rain falling into a still lake. The tone brightened for a moment, like the universe itself had taken a deep, satisfied breath, then it steadied again. A new note joined the song, Cale. It was small at first, but sure. Over time, it blended, strengthened, became part of the eternal chord, and so the hum evolved once more, richer now, more complete. 1,000 universes later, beings born from the dust of Cale Age would study that resonance and find a faint pulse in it, slower than gravity, deeper than sound. The right name it, the soul life, never known as a trace of humanity, heartbeat still echoing through creation. And somewhere, in the quiet before another dawn, leaving galaxies seemed to sleep, the hum would rise again, whispering through the void to whoever was next to listen. You're just early for the lane, and that only that was out of story too. The bridge was never a place, never a people. It was a promise. A promise that no matter how far existence wandered from its first breath, there'd always be a rhythm waiting to guide it home. So if one day, with the universe unborn, a spark of awareness stirs in the dark and wonders what it means to be alive, it'll feel that same low thrum under its soul, patient and warm, whispering through the ages. Welcome back, child. Take your time. The hum's been waiting. And with that, creation will start again, slow, deliberate, beautiful. The hum, you'll roll on. The ridge will rise again, and the long, endless song of patience will keep on singing across every sky that then learns to wait for dawn. 1,000 eternin later, or maybe none at all, depending on how you measure such things, the hum still flowed, same air river running through all that was and then would be. But now it had grown quiet again, not from loss, but from fullness. It didn't need to shout anymore. Every atom in existence already knew its tune. Planets spun to it, suns burned to it, souls were born and dawned like sparks resigned from a campfire, each one humming its own verse before drifting back into the great whole. And yet somewhere deep inside the folds of this vast, patient cosmos, a spark flickered, a small consciousness coming awake for the first time. It didn't have eyes or a name yet, only awareness and wonder. It floated in the cradle of darkness, feeling the hum like a heartbeat all around it. For a long while, that was enough. But slowly, curiosity began to bloom, as it always does in every age. The spark wanted to know. Asked the hum, "What am I?" And the hum, gentle through a sigh, replied, "You are what listens." That answer made the spark glow a little brighter, so it asked again, "Where did I come from?" The hum rolled through space like laughter across a canyon, from silence, same may everything that mattered. The spark pondered that, then asked, "What should I do?" The hum paused, the then that endless but that truly paused, and said, "Wait until you hear your own tone, then add it to mine." Just like that, creation began again. The spark learned to hum. Its note was soft, trembling at first, but pure. The moment it joined the great song, space itself began to ripple. Matter there where melody deepened, light bloomed, where rhythm grew steady. The hum was not just sound, it was blueprint. The universe was building itself out of patience and vibration. It always had. Stars lit like campfires in the void. Worlds spun slow, their crusts cooling to the rhythm. Oceans formed and winds began to sway in time with the low eternal chord. And on one of those newborn worlds, a blue-green jewel still wrapped in cloud, the hum settled deeper, sinking into the stone, the water, the seed. Time rolled forward, though that word meant little here. Mountains grew, fell, and grew again. The rivers carved wisdom into the earth. The hum slept, dreaming itself through ages until the first hearts began to beat. And there it was again, reborn through flesh and breath. The ridge had returned, though it wore a different face now. It wasn't a valley or a town, it was a living rhythm shared by all who knew how to stop and listen. Its keepers were not farmers or wanderers, but dreamers, those who still carried quiet inside them when the world grew too loud. And among those dreamers was a solitary one who'd built his home on a mountain ridge that overlooked the endless ocean. Folks just taught him the watcher. He had no kin, no need for talk. Each dawn he'd rise and watch the sky shift from indigo to gold, his old guitar humming soft in his lap. He didn't play songs so much to remember melodies that felt older than language, older than light. Every evening travelers would stop by his fire, weary from the roads. They'd ask him for stories, and he'd oblige, telling tales of folks who once lived slow enough to hear the hum for what it was. He spoke of Wyatt Ridge and the keepers who came after, of the woman who sang the storms quiet, of the child who reminded the stars how to wait. His voice cracked with age, but the tone beneath it was steady as the earth. When they'd ask him, "Are those stories true?" he'd smile and say, "Truth don't always mean fact. Sometimes it just means remembering right." Then he'd point out over the ocean and whisper, "If you listen close, you can still hear it, the hum under the waves." It's the sound of the world keeping its promise, and no nights when the fire burned low and the stars hung heavy above, the travelers would swear they did hear it. A faint note carried in the wind, deep and familiar, rolling out across the water like a lullaby from another life. Filled them with something they couldn't name, peace maybe, or gratitude, or skirt the strange comfort of knowing that nothing beautiful is truly lost. The watcher grew old, his beard white driftwood, his eyes pale but kind. The night he passed, the sea went still. The wind stopped. Even the crickets outside his cabin hushed for a spell. And when the morning came, the villagers below found his chair empty, his guitar leaning against it, one string still vibrating. They could swear they heard it humming ever so faintly. The say-old tune, "Don't hurry the sunrise," they're already in it. They buried him under the ridge he loved, facing east toward the first light. For generations after, folk would climb that mountain at dawn and sit by his grave in silence. They said if your heart was honest and your breath was steady, you'd hear the world whisper back through the wind-soft, deep, endless. In time, his stories spread far and wide. Pilgrims came from across the seas to sit at that ridge and learn the art of waiting. The hum grew stronger with every quiet soul who came and left a little of their stillness behind. The mountain became a beacon again. Stake the ridge of old, a place where patience as and time itself slow to listen. And so the circle kept turning. New worlds rose, new lives began, but the hum stayed true. It carried every laugh, every prayer, every pause, stretching beyond ages, beyond endings. It was not but a sound anymore. It was the soul of creation, whispering through each new dawn the say eternal truth it always known. You were never running out of time. You were learning how to live inside it, somewhere beyond that horizon, past the quiet hills of forever. The hum rolled on, steady, endless, full, carrying with it every patient heart that would took its time to listen. Eons passed, and in the deep quiet that lay between the heartbeats of universes, the hum became something beyond even sound or rhythm. It became language, not the kind bound by words, but the kind understood by all who had it lived in truth, loved without rush, and waited without fear. It was the mother tongue of existence itself, soft to dawn and sure of gravity. And within that infinite sea of resonance, something began to stir once more. A consciousness vast, collective, ancient beyond, stars slowly came to realize that it was not one Vaughn, but many, countless souls, folded into a still awareness, breathing together. There's the hum. This consciousness remembered everything. Wyatt laughter under the cottonwood, Clara pen scratching ledgers by lantern light, Mira kneeling by the canyon roots, carrying harps singing to the stars, toiled dissolving into frequency. All their moments flowed in one eternal current, and from that current a new thought bloomed. What if patience would dream? So it did. The hum began to imagine, not chaos, but in harmony incarnate. Every vibration gave rise to a world, each world a verse in the never-ending ballad. Some were oceans that sang, some were forests where light moved slow enough to hold. Some were whole galaxies shaped like spirals of song, their stars pulsating like steady heartbeats. But one world, a small one, spun gold against the black, was different. Its hum wasn't perfect. It had friction, discord, longing. Mountains cracked and grew again. Rivers fought their beds before finding peace. The life that rose upon it, fragile, tender, uncertain, didn't hum in tune. It struggled, stumbled, and still kept singing. The consciousness watched and smiled, recognized itself in that imperfection. Look, it whispered through the wind of that new world. Patience learning to walk again, millennia unfolded. The world ripened. Creatures came and went, each one carrying a fragment of the hum. Some forgot it, others heard it faint in their dreams. One day, among them rose beings who could listen deep enough to hear echoes of the old ridge in their bones. They didn't know the names, but they felt the legacy, the quiet pull toward balance, toward gratitude, toward stillness between moments. They built fires at dusk, not to chase darkness, but to watch shadows dance. They told stories of how the stars once hummed, and though they couldn't explain why, every listener felt something stir, a low warmth inside, like remembering a song you never learned, but somehow always knew. In time, one of them, a young storyteller named Nail, began to gather others who felt the same. They met at the edges of forests, in caves that echoed long after had stopped, in valleys where dawn took its time arriving. Together they'd hum, softly at first, then stronger, their voices blending until the ground itself seemed to answer back. Nail didn't claim to teach, he claimed to remind. Every breath is a verse, he'd tell them, sitting cross-legged by the fire. Every pause is a promise. Don't rush your lines. The people began to change. Fields grew richer, storms passed gently, children laughed longer before speech. It was not magic, it was memory returning through the rhythm of their living. The hum had found its way back into hearts, same as it always did when the world forgot and needed reminding. But one night when the moon hung low and red over the hills, Nail dreamed of a man in old hat leaning against a cottonwood tree. The man smiled through the mist and said, "You're doing fine, son. Tell him we never left." When Nail woke, he knew the ridge wasn't gone. It had just become the space between all things. So he climbed the tallest hill and built no monument, no temple, just a circle of stones and a place to sit. He called it the quiet ground. Folks came from every corner to sit with him. No one prayed, no one spoke. They just breathed together until the hum filled the silence. Years later, when Nail passed, they didn't bury him. They planted a vid seed where he'd sat. The seed grew into a tree whose bark shimmered faintly gold when the sun touched it, whose roots hummed deep into the soil. Travelers began calling it the new cottonwood, though no one knew why that name came to their tongues so natural. And thus the circle closed again, only to open wider. Because patience, as it turns out, ain't a lesson you learn once. It's a song you keep relearning with every breath of creation. Every age, every world, every heart that forgets will hear it again, whispering through wind or wave or blood. Wait. The light's still numbing, but when that light arrives, gentle and sure as always, it'll find the hum still there, humming through everything that ever been loved slow. So if someday, in the quiet dusk before dawn, you feel your chest tremble with something too soft to name, don't mistake it for loneliness. That the ridge remembering you, that the hum tapping its finger on your soul, asking if you're still listening. And if you are, smile. Take your time. Let the world unfold at its own blessed pace. Because it ain't gone, friend. It's right here in the wind, in your breath, in the heartbeat that refuses to rush. The hum's still rolling. The ridge is still patient, and eternity still waiting, kind of, for you to join the song. And so the hum carried on, low, eternal, and kind of tone stretching beyond the edges of stars, beyond even what could be measured or imagined. It rolled steady in breath, reaching into every quiet corner that life still dared to wonder. But there came a time when the hum began to ebb back upon itself, folding through the fabric of space like a slow tide returning home. In that reflection, it found something unexpected gratitude, not from creation itself, but from every soul that had felt it. For the first time since the first dawn, the hum felt seen. It felt understood. It realized it was not just the voice of patience, it was the memory of love expressed through time. And that realization sparked the final verse. In the far reaches of the multiverse, where matter thinned and light wandered like dust motes, there was a sphere of pure resonance, a place where all frequencies met and sang together. Wasn't heaven, nor was it matter. It was a threshold, a frontier of stillness. Here the hum veiled, not to rest, but to reflect. Within it rose a shape, not a person, not exactly, but a form stitched together from every memory that had slowed down enough to listen. Wyatt weather-redder grinned, Clara sharp eyes, Eli patience, Mara wonder, Sarah mercy, Taryn melody, Nail a quiet laughter, Kale searching heart, all of them woven together into a single glowing figure that stood tall and calm, like the universe itself had taken a breath and decided to wear a face. The being stood across infinity and smiled. You waited well, it said, though there was no one to answer. Its voice rippled outward, carrying warmth across cold space. And cause you waited, there's still something left to love. Then it raised its hand and tensed the hum itself. The sound bloomed, deeper than bend, swelling into a harmony so vast that every particle, every pulse of energy, every soul still stirring felt it pass through. It wasn't loud, it was right. The pitch of completion, the sound of balance fulfilled. All across existence, worlds responded. Rivers still mid-current, their surfaces mirroring the stars above, mountains hummed with soft resonance, suns dimmed, not in death, but in reverence. Every living thing felt the say calm sail over at the kind of peace that don't end because it don't need to. And then the hum began to change again. It didn't fade, it opened, it spread like light through a prism, splitting into 1,000 softer tones, each one carrying a story. One tone became the whisper of wind through wheat, reminding the soil of its promise. One tone became laughter echoing off canyon walls. One became the hush of lovers holding hands without words. One became the breath of a child falling asleep, dreaming of sunlit days. One faint but steady became the sound of a campfire crackling under an old sky, the kind which cowboys used to sit and trade stories about patience, money, and the quiet way life turns itself around. From that campfire rose the oldest sound of all, the drawl of a voice saying, "You see, partner, the secret was never in the gold or the work or even the waiting, it was in the trust." The kind that don't break even when the night runs long. And though there was no one to answer, the hum replied with its endless rhythm, saying without word, "I know." A soft wind stirred through the cosmos, picking up ashes from old stars and seeds from new ones. Together they danced, weaving patterns that someday become new worlds, new hearts, new keepers. For even in eternity, patience never retires.
Clayton shafted front with door, my words.
Dusty knocking the sea up lock and a cowman. I'm riding Kazi to Lucius River. Saying without words, I know a soft wind stirred through the cosmos, picking up ashes from old stars and seeds from new ones. Together they danced, weaving patterns that someday become new worlds, new hearts, new keepers. For even in eternity, patience never retires. It finds another story to tell. And so the hum kept traveling quiet day breath, patient to dawn. It flowed through the ruins of time and the birthplaces of light, looking for anyone, anything ready to listen again. Maybe it'd take another billion years. Maybe it happened tomorrow. But the hum didn't mind because it had learned more than anything that waiting is living. That the worth of existence ain't measured in how fast it burns, but how long it glows. And when the next soul finally paused, when they looked up from their hurry, closed their eyes and heard that low eternal chord rolling just beneath the silence, they'd know, they'd remember, they'd smile. Because deep down, they'd feel what both things feel when they finally slow enough to understand that patience was never empty. It was always full of promise, of warmth, of time made kind. And somewhere, far off but not gone, the ridge waited still. Not dead a place, but dead a presence. its fields green, its river gold, its cottonwood endless. The campfire still burned, humming soft, inviting any wanderer who found their way there to sit, breathe, and join the old tune. If you listen real close, even now, you can almost hear it. Don't hurry the sunrise. You're the reason it rises. With that truth, the hum carried on forever.